Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I work on road maintenance for the National Park Service in southeastern Utah. My name is Colt Jansen, and for the past 8 years, I've spent most of my nights inspecting the roads in Canyonlands, filling potholes, and ensuring the safety of the scenic overlooks for morning visitors. Island in the Sky is the best area I know. It's a massive table rising like a platform above the surrounding canyons and clouds. When you look out from Grandview Point, you can see 100 miles in every direction. Red rocks, blue sky, and at night, more stars than you ever knew existed. This job leaves me alone most of the time. That's not a problem for me. I love the silence. I love how sound carries differently when the wind dies down. You can hear your own footsteps from 50 meters behind you. You can hear a raven from a mile away. And on the clearest nights when the temperature drops and the air is still, you hear nothing. That kind of silence is heavy. It makes you aware of your own breath. October is the best month for night work in the park. The summer crowds are gone. The daytime heat backs off. The aspens down in the valleys start to turn gold and the night air bites just enough to keep you alert. I've always loved it. I drive the loop roads with my windows down and my headlights cutting through the dark, checking for fresh cracks in the asphalt or debris from afternoon storms. Simple work, predictable. That changed on October 9th. I left the maintenance yard in Moab just after sunset and made the hour drive south on US 191, then west on the access road into the park. The gate was unmanned. I used my key card and rolled through. By the time I reached the main plateau, full dark had settled in. No moon that night. Just stars stacked on top of stars, and the faint glow of distant Moab behind me. I started my route at the visitor center and worked my way south along the paved loop. The road follows the edge of the mesa and gives you pull-offs every few miles where tourists stop during the day to take pictures. At night, those spots are empty, just gravel turnouts with wooden rail fences and informational signs that creak in the wind. I was about 3 miles past Mesa Arch when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a tower light from one of the potash operations down in the valley. Those facilities run 24 hours, and their lights can catch your eye from strange angles. But this wasn't flickering, it wasn't moving, and it wasn't down in the valley, it was up. I slowed the truck and leaned forward against the steering wheel to get a better angle through the windshield. The object sat maybe 2,000 feet above the canyon floor, which put it roughly level with where I was parked on the mesa. It was perfectly round. Not a sphere exactly, more like a disc seen edge-on, but so cleanly circular that my brain kept trying to correct it into something familiar. A water tower, a cell antenna, anything with a normal explanation. It wasn't any of those things. The color was hard to pin down. In the starlight it looked dark, almost black, but the edges caught a faint metallic sheen like brushed steel. It didn't glow, it didn't pulse. It just sat there in the air above White Rim Road, motionless, silent, and wrong. I killed my engine and stepped out. The cold hit me immediately. I zipped my jacket and stood beside the truck with my hands in my pockets, staring. I've spent thousands of hours in this park. I know what belongs and what doesn't. Aircraft make noise, drones whine, helicopters beat the air. This thing did none of that. I checked my watch, 9:47 p.m. The object didn't move for a full 3 minutes. I timed it, then, without any visible acceleration, it slid to the north. Not fast, but smooth, like it was on a track. It covered maybe half a mile in 10 seconds and stopped again, holding position above a different section of the canyon. I reached back into the truck for my radio and keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Jansen on Island in the Sky. You got anyone else working the South District tonight?" Static crackled. Then a woman's voice came through. Mira Dane. She was the night ranger assigned to patrol the campgrounds and trailheads. We'd crossed paths a few times, but never worked closely. "Negative, Colt. Just you and me up here. What's going on?" I hesitated. I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I'd been out in the cold too long. "You near Grandview Point?" I asked. "About 10 minutes south of there. Why?" "Can you head that direction and meet me at the overlook? I need a second set of eyes on something." "Copy. On my way." I got back in the truck and drove south, keeping the object in sight through my passenger window. It stayed where it was, suspended above the canyon like a hole punched in the sky. When I reached Grandview Point, I parked in the lot and walked to the edge of the overlook. The cliff drops 1,000 feet straight down from there, opening into a bowl of layered rock that stretches all the way to the Needles District. The object had moved again. Now it sat directly in front of me, maybe a mile out and slightly below my line of sight. Close enough that I could make out a faint texture on its surface, not smooth, segmented, like panels fitted together with seams you could almost see. Mira's truck rolled into the lot behind me. I heard her door open and her boots on the gravel. She walked up beside me without saying anything at first, just looked where I was looking. "What am I seeing?" she asked. "I don't know." "How long has it been there?" 20 minutes, maybe more." She pulled a small pair of binoculars from her belt and raised them. I watched her face. She went still in a way that told me she was seeing the same thing I was. "That's not a drone," she said. "No. And it's not a plane. No." She lowered the binoculars and looked at me. Mira was younger than me by a few years, with short dark hair and the kind of calm focus you get from spending time in remote places. She didn't look scared. She looked curious. "I've got a trail camera in the truck," she said. "Night vision mode. If that thing's still there in 5 minutes, I'm documenting it." "Good idea." She jogged back to her vehicle and returned with a small digital camera mounted on a handheld grip. She powered it on, adjusted the settings, and aimed it at the object. The screen on the back of the camera glowed faintly in the dark. I stepped closer to see what it was capturing. The object showed up on the display, but something was wrong. The image flickered, not like bad reception, more like the camera was struggling to hold focus on it. One frame, it would appear sharp and clear. The next frame, it would blur or double, like two exposures stacked on top of each other. Mira frowned and tapped the screen. "That's weird," she said. "Battery's full. Settings are fine. It shouldn't be doing that." "Is it recording?" "Yeah, but I don't know if this footage is going to be usable." We stood there for another 10 minutes while she filmed. The object didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just hung in the air above the canyon, defying everything I knew about how things fly. Then it was gone. Not gradually. Not with a slow fade or a drift into the distance. 1 second it was there. The next second it wasn't. Like someone had flipped a switch. Mira lowered the camera and stared at the empty space where it had been. "Did you see it leave?" she asked. "No, it just stopped being there." She rewound the footage on the camera and played it back. We watched the screen together. The object appeared in frame, flickering and unstable. Then, at the 14-minute mark, the image went black for a single frame. When it came back, the object was gone, and the canyon was empty. "Play that again," I said. She did. Same result. One black frame, then nothing. "That's not a camera malfunction," she said. "That's something else." We walked back to the trucks and stood under the dome of stars. The cold was settling in hard now. My breath came out in clouds. Mira ejected the memory card from the camera and held it up to the dome light in her truck. "I'm going to download this when I get back to the office," she said. "If the file's intact, I'll send you a copy. Appreciate it." "You ever see anything like that before?" she asked. "Never." "Me neither." We stood there in silence for a moment. Then she got in her truck and drove north toward the campground. I waited until her taillights disappeared around the curve, then got in my own vehicle and finished my route. The rest of the night was quiet, normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. 2 nights later, I was back on the mesa. Same route, same cold, same stars. I told myself I wasn't looking for the object, I was just doing my job. But I kept checking the sky between tasks, scanning the horizon whenever I stopped to clear a drainage grate or mark a pothole. Mira had messaged me the day before. The footage from her camera was corrupted. Not blank, just unusable. The file opened but showed nothing but digital noise and stuttering frames. The audio track was worse. It sounded like static mixed with a low hum that rose and fell in waves. She'd tried 3 different programs to clean it up. None of them worked. "The card itself is fine," she wrote. "I tested it with other files, just that one recording is toast." I didn't know what to make of that. Cameras fail. Files corrupt. It happens. But the timing felt wrong. Too convenient. I was near Upheaval Dome around 10:30 p.m. when my radio crackled. "Colt, you copy?" It was Mira. "Yeah, go ahead. I'm at Buck Canyon Overlook. You need to get over here." Her voice was tight. Not panicked, but close. "On my way." I turned the truck around and headed north. Buck Canyon is a smaller pull-off about 6 miles from Upheaval Dome, tucked into a curve where the road bends close to the cliff edge. I covered the distance in under 10 minutes and pulled in beside Mira's Ranger truck. She was standing outside with her flashlight off, looking west into the canyon. I got out and walked over. "What have you got?" She pointed without saying anything. The object was back. This time it was closer, much closer. It sat maybe 300 yards out from the overlook, hovering at eye level with us. The same circular shape. The same segmented surface. But now I could see details I'd missed before. Faint lines running across the panels like seams or rivets. A slight rotation, so slow you almost couldn't track it. Like a coin spinning in water as it sinks. And it was silent. I've been around helicopters. I've been around planes and drones and every kind of flying machine that operates in this part of the state. They all make noise. Rotors chop. Engines whine. Propellers hum. This thing produced nothing. The air around it was as still as the air around me. "How long has it been there?" I asked. 5 minutes. I was driving the loop and saw it from the road. I pulled over and called you. Did it move? Not since I've been watching. I walked to the edge of the overlook and leaned against the wooden rail. The drop below me was 800 feet straight down to a narrow canyon floor where a dry wash snaked between boulders. The object floated in the space between me and the far wall, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Mira stepped up beside me. I didn't bring the camera this time. Probably wouldn't work anyway. Yeah. We stood there and watched. My hands gripped the rail so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't realize I was doing it until Mira glanced down and said, "You okay?" "I don't know what I'm looking at." "Me neither." The object rotated another few degrees. As it turned, the starlight caught one of the seams and reflected back at us, sharp and bright like a mirror. Then it went dull again. "You think it knows we're here?" Mira asked. The question made my stomach tighten. I hadn't let myself think that far yet. I'd been treating it like a phenomenon, something to observe. The idea that it might be aware of us, that it might be observing back, changed everything. "I don't know," I said, "because it feels like it's waiting." She was right. That's exactly what it felt like. Not drifting, not patrolling, waiting. We stood there for another 20 minutes. The cold crept through my jacket and into my bones. My feet went numb. Mira shifted her weight from one leg to the other, trying to keep circulation going. Neither of us wanted to leave. Neither of us wanted to be the first to suggest it. Finally, the object moved. It didn't slide this time. It dropped, straight down, faster than anything that size should be able to fall, and stopped 10 feet above the canyon floor. Then it shot upward, climbing in a vertical line until it cleared the far rim of the canyon and disappeared into the night sky. No sound, no exhaust trail, no sign it had ever been there. Mira let out a long breath. "Did that just happen?" "Yeah." "Okay, good. I thought I was losing it." We walked back to the trucks and stood under the dome light of my cab. Mira pulled out her notebook and started writing. Date, time, location, description. I watched her hand move across the page, steady and precise. "You filing a report?" I asked. "I don't know yet. Are you?" I thought about it. Filing a report meant calling the district supervisor. It meant filling out forms and answering questions and trying to explain what we'd seen in a way that didn't make us sound unstable. It meant dealing with skepticism and dismissal and the possibility that our credibility would take a hit. "I don't think I am," I said. "Yeah, me neither." She finished writing and closed the notebook. "But I'm keeping a record, just in case." "In case of what?" "In case it comes back." It came back. 3 nights in a row after that, the object appeared somewhere along the island in the sky loop. Always between 9:30 p.m. and midnight. Always silent. Always in a different location, but never far from the road. Mira and I started coordinating. We'd check in at the start of our shifts and plan our routes so we could respond quickly if one of us spotted it. We didn't talk about why we were doing this. We didn't discuss what we thought it was or where it came from. We just kept watching. On the 4th night, I was parked at Schaefer Canyon Overlook when Mira radioed. "Colt, I've got it at White Rim, same spot as the first night." "Copy, stay put, I'm coming to you." I drove south as fast as I dared on the narrow park road. No traffic that time of night, but the curves were tight and the drop-offs were sheer. I reached Mira's position in 15 minutes and pulled up beside her truck. She was standing at the overlook with her arms crossed, staring out into the canyon. The object hung in the air about a mile out, maybe 500 feet below us. This time it wasn't alone. A second object sat 200 yards to the left of the first. Same size, same shape, same silent stillness. They weren't moving, but they were positioned in a way that felt deliberate, like markers, or sentries. "When did the second one show up?" I asked. "About 2 minutes before I called you. The first one was there when I arrived, then the second one just appeared. Same as before, no transition, just there. This is getting worse. Or more interesting." I looked at her. She didn't seem scared. She seemed energized, like this was a puzzle she wanted to solve. "You're not worried?" I asked. "I'm terrified," she said. "But I'm also paying attention. Whatever this is, it's happening to us. Right here, right now. And if we walk away, we'll never know what it was. Maybe that's okay. Maybe. But I don't think I can do that." We watched the objects for another half hour. They didn't move. They didn't interact with each other. They just hung there in the dark, perfectly spaced, perfectly still. Then my radio hissed. Not a voice, just static. But it rose in volume until it filled the cab of my truck and spilled out into the night air. Mira's radio did the same thing. We both reached for our belts and turned down the volume, but the static didn't stop. It peaked, held for 5 seconds, then cut out. When I looked back at the canyon, both objects were gone. Mira checked her watch. 10:47 p.m., same time frame as the other nights. You think there's a pattern? I think something's on a schedule. We drove back to the maintenance yard together that night. Mira followed me in her truck and we parked side by side in the gravel lot. It was past midnight. The office building was dark. We sat on the tailgate of my truck with thermoses of coffee and didn't say much at first. Finally, Mira broke the silence. I looked up reports, she said. FAA, local law enforcement, park incident logs. Nothing matches what we're seeing. You think we're the only ones? I think we're the only ones reporting it, or trying to. What's that mean? It means maybe other people have seen it and decided to keep quiet, because talking about it sounds insane. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone lukewarm. Does sound insane. Yeah, but we both saw it, multiple times. Same details, same behavior. So what do? She looked at me. We keep watching, and we stay safe. You think it's dangerous? I don't know, but it's not ours, and that makes me careful. We finished our coffee in silence and went home. I lived in Moab in a small rental near the river. When I got back, I sat in my truck in the driveway for a long time before going inside. The stars above me looked the same as always. Bright, distant, indifferent. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something up there was watching back. The next night, October 17th, was the last time I saw it. Mira and I met at Candlestick Tower Overlook just after sunset. The plan was simple. We'd park, set up a watch position, and wait. No radios this time. We'd stay together. If the object appeared, we'd observe until it left. Then we'd decide what to do next. The night was colder than usual. A front had pushed through that afternoon, and the wind carried the smell of distant rain. We sat in my truck with the engine off and the windows cracked, watching the canyon fade from orange to black as the last light drained from the sky. At 9:52 p.m., the object appeared. It came from the north, moving faster than I'd seen it move before. It crossed the length of the canyon in under 10 seconds and stopped directly in front of us, maybe 100 yards out and level with the overlook. Close enough that I could see every detail. The segmented panels, the faint seams, the slow rotation, and something new. A light. Not bright, not a spotlight or a beam, just a soft glow that pulsed from somewhere inside the object. Deep red, cycling in a rhythm that felt almost biological, like a heartbeat. Mira grabbed my arm. You seeing this? Yeah. What is that? I don't know. The pulsing quickened. The object rotated faster, still silent, still smooth. Then it stopped abruptly. The rotation ceased. The light went out. And for 3 long seconds the object hung there in perfect stillness. Then it moved toward us. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberate. It closed half the distance between us in 2 seconds and stopped again. Now it was close enough that I could see my own reflection in its surface. Distorted, stretched, but recognizable. My heart slammed against my ribs. Mira's hand tightened on my arm. "Start the truck," she said. I reached for the ignition. My hand shook. I turned the key. Nothing. I tried again. The engine didn't turn over. No click, no grinding, nothing. The dashboard stayed dark. Cold. I know. The object drifted closer. Now it was 30 yards away. I could hear something. Not a sound exactly. More like a pressure in my ears. A low-frequency hum that I felt in my chest more than I heard. Mira opened her door. "We need to move. Now." I followed her out of the truck. We backed away from the overlook, keeping our eyes on the object. It didn't follow us, it just held its position above the truck, rotating slowly again, the red light flickering back to life. We stood there at the edge of the parking lot, 50 feet from my truck, and watched. The object hovered for another minute. Then, without warning, it shot straight up. In less than a second, it was 1,000 feet above us, then 2,000, then gone. The pressure in my ears released. The wind returned, and my truck started. The engine turned over on its own, the dashboard lights flooding the cab with orange glow. The radio hissed once, then went quiet. Mira and I looked at each other. Neither of us said anything. There was nothing to say. We got back in the truck and I drove us both to the maintenance yard. I didn't stop to check the road. I didn't log any work. I just drove. That was 5 months ago. Mira transferred to Arches National Park in December. She didn't give a reason, just put in the paperwork and moved. We've texted a few times since then. Short messages. Nothing about what we saw. I stayed at Canyonlands through the winter season. I kept working nights. I kept checking the sky. I haven't seen the object again. But I've noticed other things. Small things. Easy to dismiss if you're not paying attention. My truck's odometer jumped 40 miles overnight once. I'd parked it at the yard and didn't drive it until the next shift. When I got in, the reading was higher than it should have been. I checked the logs. No one else had used it. The trail camera Mira used that first night? I found it in the equipment locker 3 weeks later. I don't know who returned it. Mira said she kept it. But there it was, sitting on the shelf with a fresh memory card inside. Empty. And twice, while parked at Grandview Point on quiet nights, I felt that pressure in my ears again. Just for a few seconds. Then it's gone. I don't know what we saw out there. I don't know if it was a craft or a probe or something else entirely. I don't know if it came from another country or another planet or another dimension. I don't have those answers. What I do know is this. We weren't alone on that mesa. Something was there with us. Something that could move without sound, appear without warning, and shut down a truck engine from 30 yards away. Something that was interested in us. And maybe that's the part that bothers me most. Not that it was there, but that it noticed us, that it came close, that it looked. I still work for the park service. I still drive the loop roads at night. But I don't stop at the overlooks anymore unless I have to. I don't sit and watch the canyons. I keep moving. I keep my radio on, and I keep my eyes on the road. Mira wrote me one last message before she stopped responding. It came through at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in January. Just 3 sentences. I did some research. Other rangers have seen things. No one talks about it. I wanted to ask her more. I wanted to know who, when, where. But I didn't. Because part of me didn't want to know. Part of me wanted to believe we were the only ones. That what happened to us was isolated, contained. But I don't think it was. I think Island in the Sky has been a watching ground for a long time. I think the silence of that mesa, the emptiness of those canyons, the sheer isolation of that place makes it perfect for observation. By who or what, I can't say. All I can tell you is what I saw. A circular object, silent and still, hovering above the canyon at night. Segmented panels, slow rotation, a red light that pulsed like a heartbeat, and a presence that felt aware. If you visit Canyonlands, if you drive the loop road after dark, if you pull over at one of the overlooks and look out into that massive empty space, pay attention. Not just to what you see, but to what you feel. If the air pressure changes, if your radio fills with static, if your vehicle won't start for no reason, if you see something in the sky that holds too still or moves too fast, or makes no sound when it should. Don't try to film it. Don't try to get closer. Don't try to make sense of it in the moment. Just leave. Get back in your vehicle, drive to the nearest populated area, and don't look back. Because once it notices you, once it knows you've seen it, something changes. You become part of whatever it's doing out there, and I'm not sure that's a list you want to be on. I've thought about quitting. I've thought about transferring like Mira did. I've thought about leaving the Park Service altogether and finding work that keeps me indoors, under lights, around people. But I haven't done it yet. Maybe I'm stubborn. Maybe I'm waiting to see if it comes back. Maybe I just need to know if it was real, or if Mira and I shared some kind of hallucination brought on by cold and isolation and too many nights alone in the dark. Except I know it was real. I felt the truck die under me. I felt the pressure in my ears. I saw my reflection in that surface, distorted and strange. It was real, and that's what keeps me up at night. Not the fear of seeing it again, but the certainty that it's still out there, still watching, still waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it appeared to us on those specific nights or why it stopped. I don't know if it's done with the mesa or if it's just moved on to a different section of the park. All I know is that Island in the Sky isn't just a name. It's a description, a platform suspended between Earth and space, a place where the ground falls away and the sky takes over. A place where you can see for 100 miles in every direction and still feel like you're standing on the edge of something much larger. Something that sees you back. If you're a ranger, if you're a road worker, if you're anyone who spends nights alone in remote places, you probably already know this. But I'll say it anyway. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If your equipment fails for no reason, don't write it off. If you see something in the sky that doesn't move like it should, take note. And if it ever gets close enough that you can see your reflection in it, turn around and walk away. Because that's the moment when it's decided you're worth a closer look. That's the moment I remember most clearly, standing 50 feet from my truck, watching that object hover in silence, seeing myself stretched across its surface like I was being measured. I don't know what it found. I don't know if I passed some test or failed one. I just know that when it left, it did so with purpose. And when my truck started on its own, I didn't question it. I got in, I drove, and I didn't stop until I reached pavement. That's my advice to you if it happens. If you see what we saw, don't be brave, don't be curious. Just go. Mira and I made it out. We're both fine. We changed our routes, our schedules, our approach to the work, and we're done with Island in the Sky at night. That's the end of it for us, and that's as much closure as I ever expect to have. The object is still out there. I'm certain of that. Somewhere above the canyons, somewhere in the dark, it's still moving, still watching, still silent. I just hope it's done with me, because I'm done with it. My name is Nora Flanders, and I've worked search and rescue coordination for Canyonlands National Park for 6 years. Before that, I spent 3 years as a field ranger in Zion, and 2 more in Capitol Reef. I know the desert. I know how it moves, how it sounds, and how it can kill you if you're careless. I've pulled lost hikers out of slot canyons. I've tracked down climbers with broken ankles on 1,000-foot walls. I've coordinated helicopter extractions in winds that made the pilots pray out loud over the radio. I've never lost anyone on my watch, not until March 11th. That's not exactly true. I didn't lose them, they just stopped being findable. The Needles District sits in the southern section of Canyonlands, an hour south of Moab on US 191, and then west on a 2-lane highway that cuts through open desert before dropping into a maze of red rock spires and narrow canyons. It's quieter than Island in the Sky. Fewer visitors, harder terrain, more technical routes. The kind of place that attracts experienced backpackers who know what they're doing and don't need hand-holding. On March 9th, 2 campers checked in at the ranger station near Squaw Flat Campground. A couple from Denver, mid-30s, fit, well-equipped. They had permits for a 3-day backpacking loop through Chesler Park and into the Joint Trail area. Standard route, well-marked. They signed the log, showed their permits, and headed out just after noon. They were supposed to check back in on the 11th by 6 p.m. When they didn't show, the campground host called it in. That's when I got involved. I drove down from Moab the next morning with Ezra Reddick, a field ranger who'd worked the Needles for 8 years. Ezra was in his early 40s, lean and sunburned, with the kind of quiet confidence you only get from spending half your life on rock. He knew every trail, every water source, every shortcut and dead end in that maze. We met the campground host at the station. He was a retired geology teacher named Paul who volunteered every spring. He showed us the logbook. David and Ann Pritchard, he said. Denver address. They had all the right gear, I checked. Good boots, plenty of water, maps, GPS unit. They weren't greenhorns. Did they mention any side trips? I asked. Negative, standard loop, Chesler Park, Devil's Kitchen, Joint Trail, back to Elephant Hill Trailhead. Weather been clear? Bone dry, no storms. Temps in the low 60s during the day, 30s at night. Perfect conditions. Ezra leaned against the desk and crossed his arms. You try their emergency contact? Called twice, sister in Boulder. She hasn't heard from them. She's worried but not panicking yet. Says they're experienced and sometimes go off-grid for a week at a time. Okay, I said. We'll start at Elephant Hill and work the loop. If they twisted an ankle or got cliffed out somewhere, we'll find them. We loaded our packs into Ezra's parked truck and drove the rough dirt road to Elephant Hill. The road is notorious. Steep grades, tight switchbacks, exposed ledges with no guardrails. You need 4-wheel drive and nerves. Ezra drove it like he was half asleep. He'd done it 1,000 times. We parked at the trailhead just before noon. The sky was blue and cloudless. The air smelled like dust and juniper. A light breeze pushed through the spires, making a low whistle that never quite stopped. We shouldered our packs and headed out. The trail climbs fast through a forest of sandstone pillars that rise 200 feet straight up. They're called the Needles because that's what they look like. Thousands of them packed tight, weathered into strange shapes by wind and water over millions of years. Walking through them feels like moving through a city built by something that didn't think like us. We made good time to Chesler Park, a wide meadow surrounded by rock walls. It's one of the most beautiful spots in the park. Open grass, wildflowers in spring, views in every direction. We found their first campsite near the north edge. Fire ring, tent footprints in the dirt, a small pile of trash they'd bagged and hung from a juniper branch. They were here, Ezra said, stayed at least one night. Look clean, I said, no signs of trouble. We checked the surrounding area for tracks, found boot prints heading south toward Devil's Kitchen. We followed. The trail drops into a slot canyon system that twists and narrows until you're walking between walls that almost touch overhead. It's called the Joint Trail because you're moving through joints in the rock, fractures that split the sandstone into passages barely wide enough for a person with a pack. It's tight, technical, and disorienting if you don't know where you're going. We found their second camp at Devil's Kitchen, a small alcove with an overhang that provides shade and shelter. Same setup. Fire ring, gear signs, no indication of distress, but no people. They should have been back by now, Ezra said. This puts them right on schedule for day 2. They would have looped back north yesterday. Unless they changed the plan. Why would they? Maybe they saw something worth exploring. Maybe they felt good and pushed farther. Maybe. We continued the loop, moving faster now. The sun dropped lower, and the shadows between the spires grew long and sharp. By 5 p.m., we'd completed the circuit and returned to Elephant Hill. No sign of the Pritchards. No gear, no tracks past Devil's Kitchen, nothing. We radioed the station. Paul confirmed no one had checked in. "We're going back out," I told him. "Full search protocol. Get me 2 more rangers and a dog team if you can." "Copy. I'll make the calls." Ezra and I ate quickly, refilled our water, and grabbed headlamps. We decided to retrace the road at night in case the Pritchards were moving slow or injured. Sometimes people get disoriented and backtrack or take a wrong turn into unmapped terrain. By 8 p.m., we were deep in the joint trail again. Our headlamps cut narrow beams through the darkness. The rock walls rose invisible on either side. The only sounds were our boots on stone and our breathing. At 9:30 p.m., Ezra's radio crackled. "Reddick, you copy?" It was Paul. "Go ahead." "Dog team's a no-go. Closest unit is in Grand Junction and can't mobilize until morning. I've got 2 rangers en route. They'll meet you at Elephant Hill by 11. "Copy. We'll be there." We turned back and moved through the slots. The route is simple enough during the day, but at night it's a different animal. Every shadow looks like a passage. Every dead end feels like the right way until you hit the wall and have to backtrack. At 10:15 p.m., we climbed out of the joint trail and into Chesler Park again. The meadow opened around us, wide and black under the stars. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. No moon, just stars stacked on stars. That's when I noticed it. The sound had stopped. Not suddenly, not like someone hit a switch, but gradually the way you don't realize you've been hearing something until it's gone. The wind through the spires, the distant rustle of brush, the faint hum of insects. All of it had faded to nothing. I stopped walking. Ezra stopped beside me. "You hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" "Exactly." We stood there in the middle of the meadow, listening to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind, the kind that makes your skin prickle because something should be making noise and nothing is. Ezra turned slowly, scanning the tree line with his headlamp. The beam swept across juniper and stone and empty grass. Nothing moved. "Let's keep moving," he said. We crossed the meadow and picked up the trail north. My watch read 10:22 p.m. I made a mental note. We needed to reach Elephant Hill by 11 to meet the other rangers. 5 minutes later, I checked my watch again. 10:22 p.m. I frowned. That didn't make sense. We'd been walking steady for at least 5 minutes, maybe more. I tapped the watch face. The second hand wasn't moving. "Ezra, yeah? What time you got?" He glanced at his wrist. 10:22. Check your second hand. He did, then he looked at me. "It's not moving. Mine either." We stopped. Ezra pulled his radio from his belt and keyed the mic. Static filled the air, but not normal static. It was deeper, thicker, like white noise with weight behind it. He released the key. The static continued. He turned the volume down. It didn't change. "Radio's dead," he said. "Battery?" "Full charge this morning. Should be good for 2 days." I checked my own radio. Same thing. Static hum. No response, no change when I adjusted the dials. "We need to move," I said. "Something's wrong." We picked up the pace and headed for the trailhead. My heart rate climbed. I kept checking my watch. Still 10:22. Still frozen. Then the air pressure changed. It didn't drop. It pressed. like the atmosphere got heavier in the span of a single breath. My ears popped. Ezra stumbled and caught himself against a boulder. "You feel that?" he asked. "Yeah." The sky above us flickered, not lightning, not a flash. A flicker, like a light bulb, losing connection. The stars dimmed for half a second, then came back full brightness, then dimmed again. "What the hell is that?" Ezra said. I didn't answer. I was staring at something else. To our left, maybe 200 yards out across the meadow, a column of blue light stood between two of the taller spires. It wasn't shining down from above, it was just there, vertical and solid, like a pillar holding up the sky. The light was pale, almost white-blue, and it didn't cast shadows. The ground around it looked the same as the ground around us. No glow, no halo, no gradient, just a column of light in the dark. Ezra grabbed my arm. "We're leaving, now!" We turned and ran. Not a full sprint. The terrain wouldn't allow it, but a fast jog, watching our footing, breathing hard. I could taste metal in my mouth. My chest felt tight. Behind us, the column moved. I glanced back once, just once. The light had shifted 50 yards closer, now standing between us and the tree line. It hadn't traveled, it had relocated, one position to another with no transition. "Don't look," Ezra said. "Just move." We hit the edge of Chesler Park and dropped into the trail that leads north toward Elephant Hill. The path wound between rock walls and narrowed into a shallow slot. Easier to navigate, harder to see the sky. I checked my watch. 10:22 p.m. "Ezra, what time?" "Don't tell me. I don't want to know." We pushed through the slot for another 10 minutes. My legs burned. My pack dug into my shoulders. The metal taste in my mouth got stronger. Then we were out. The trail opened onto a low saddle with a view north toward the main road. Our truck sat a quarter-mile away, parked at the Elephant Hill trailhead under a single yellow light on a pole. The relief hit me like cold water. We were close. We were almost out. I checked my watch. 10:06 p.m. I stopped dead. Ezra stopped beside me. "What?" he asked. I showed him my wrist. He looked at his own watch. Then he looked at me. "That's not possible," he said. "I know. We were at 10:22. We walked for 20 minutes at least. I know. And now it's 10:06. I know." We stood there on the saddle, staring at our watches, like they could explain themselves. The second hands were moving again. Normal speed, normal function. But the time was wrong. We'd lost 16 minutes, or gained them back, or never had them in the first place. Ezra turned in a slow circle, scanning the terrain. "Where's the light?" I looked. The meadow behind us was dark. The spires rose black against the stars. No blue column, no flicker, no pressure in the air, just night. "It's gone," I said. "You saw it, right? I didn't imagine that." "I saw it." "Okay, good. Because I'm not sure I trust myself right now." We walked the last quarter mile to the truck in silence. My legs felt weak. My hands shook when I pulled the pack off my shoulders. Ezra got in the driver's seat and started the engine. The dashboard lit up. The radio came to life. Normal park frequency. Normal traffic. He picked up the handset. "Station, this is Reddick. You copy?" "Copy, Ezra. Go ahead." It was Paul. "We're at Elephant Hill. What's your status on those Rangers?" "They're 10 minutes out. You find anything?" Ezra looked at me. I shook my head. "Negative," he said. "No sign of the missing campers. We're going to wait here for the backup team, then head back out at first light." "Copy. Stay safe." Ezra hung up the mic and leaned back in his seat. "We're not telling him." Telling him what? About the light, the time, any of it. Why not? Because it sounds insane. And because I don't know what we'd be reporting. A malfunction? A hallucination? We don't even know what we saw. I wanted to argue, but I didn't. Because he was right. What would I say? We saw a blue column of light that moved without moving. Our watches froze, then we lost 16 minutes and now everything's fine? Okay, I said. We keep it between us. For now. The 2 backup rangers arrived 20 minutes later. Young guys, early 20s, eager and freshly trained. We briefed them on the search area and the Pritchards' last known positions. Then we all drove back to the station, grabbed a few hours of sleep in the bunkhouse, and were back at Elephant Hill by sunrise. The second day of searching turned up nothing. We expanded the radius, checked unmapped side canyons, climbed to higher vantage points. No gear, no tracks, no sign anyone had been in that area beyond the 2 camps we'd already found. By the 3rd day, we brought in a helicopter. It flew grid patterns over the Needles for 6 hours. The pilot was good, experienced, trained to spot anomalies in terrain. He found nothing. On day 4, we shifted to recovery mode. The assumption became that the Pritchards had either fallen into a slot canyon we couldn't access or had gone off route into BLM land south of the park boundary. We filed reports, notified next of kin, and kept the case open. But we stopped active searching. I went back to Moab on day 5. Ezra stayed in the Needles. He said he wanted to check a few more areas on his own time. I didn't press him on it. I knew what he was really doing. He was looking for the light. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Ezra. Need to talk, in person. Can you come down? I drove to the Needles the next day. We met at the ranger station. Paul was off shift. We had the place to ourselves. Ezra looked tired, thinner than I remembered. He hadn't shaved in a while, and his eyes had that hollow look you get from not sleeping enough. There were dark circles under his eyes that makeup wouldn't have covered. His hands shook slightly when he poured coffee from the pot on the desk. You okay? I asked. Define okay. You eating, sleeping, enough to function. That's not an answer. He set the coffee down without drinking it. I've been having dreams, not nightmares exactly, just dreams where I'm back in the meadow and the columns are there, but I can't move. I'm frozen in place and time keeps cycling around me. Same moments over and over. I wake up and check my watch, and for a second I'm convinced it's going to say 10:22. But it doesn't. No, it's always normal. But the feeling stays with me, like part of me is still back there. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. I'd been having my own version of it. Not dreams, but moments during the day when I'd check my watch 3 or 4 times in a row, just to make sure the second hand was moving. What's going on? I asked. He pulled a notebook from his jacket and set it on the desk. The cover was worn and the pages inside were dog-eared and marked with colored tabs. I've been keeping a log. Every night I'm in the field. I write down times, locations, observations. Anything that feels off. That's good protocol. It's not protocol, it's obsession. I've been going out there almost every night. Different areas, different times, testing patterns. Ezra, I know how it sounds, but I need to understand what happened to us. I need to know if it's consistent or random. If there's a pattern, maybe we can predict it. Maybe we can warn people. He opened the notebook and showed me pages filled with detailed entries. Times, GPS coordinates, weather conditions, equipment readings. Some entries had notes in the margins. Felt pressure here. Watch slowed but didn't stop. Radio static 11:45, 11:52. You're documenting everything, I said. Everything. And I'm finding patterns. Look at this. He flipped to a page with a hand-drawn map of the Needles district. red dots marked locations throughout the area. Every red dot is a place where I've experienced some kind of anomaly. Time distortion, equipment malfunction, unexplained lights, unusual atmospheric pressure. I counted the dots. There were over 20 of them. Most of them cluster around 3 locations, he continued. Chesler Park, which we already know, Devil's Kitchen, where the Pritchards had their second camp, and here. He pointed to a spot on the map labeled Big Spring Canyon. I haven't been there yet. It's remote, hard access. But based on the pattern, I think that's another hot zone. Hot zone for what? For whatever's causing this. Look at the spacing. The 3 locations form a triangle, almost perfect, and the distance between each point is nearly identical, 4.7 miles. I studied the map. He was right. The spacing was too regular to be coincidence. What do you think it means? I asked. I don't know, but I think these aren't random events. I think something is using specific locations, like markers or broadcast points. And I think whatever happened to the Pritchards happened because they camped inside the triangle. The implications of that made my skin crawl. If he was right, if there was a defined zone where these events occurred, then the Pritchards hadn't just gotten unlucky. They'd walked into something deliberate. Have you told anyone else about this? I asked. Who would I tell? The superintendent? He'd pull me off duty. Paul? He'd think I'd lost it. You're the only other person who was there. You're the only one who knows I'm not making this up. What's going on? I asked again, more firmly this time. He flipped to another section of the notebook. It's happened 3 more times. My stomach dropped. The light? Not the light, the time. My watch has frozen twice, once at 2:14 a.m., once at 11:37 p.m. Both times I was in the backcountry. Both times the second hand stopped, then started again minutes later. And both times the clock jumped backward. How far back? First time, 8 minutes. Second time, 12. He showed me the log entries. Each one was meticulously detailed. The exact moment the watch stopped, the duration of the freeze, the amount of time lost when it restarted. He'd even noted environmental factors: temperature, wind speed, cloud cover, phase of the moon. There's another pattern, he said. It only happens on clear nights, no clouds, no precipitation, and it always happens between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m., never during the day, never during twilight, only deep night. That could just be when you're out there. I've tested that. I've gone out during the day and stayed through sunset. Nothing happens until full dark. It's like whatever's causing this needs darkness, or uses it. I wanted to tell him he was reading too much into it, that he was connecting dots that didn't exist. But I couldn't, because everything he was saying matched my own instincts. Something was happening in the needles, something consistent and deliberate. Show me the rest, I said. I sat down. Anyone else with you? No, just me. But I tested it. I set my phone next to my watch and filmed both screens while I walked a section of trail near Devil's Kitchen. The watch froze. The phone kept running. When I checked the footage later, there's a gap. The video skips, like frames were cut out. Show me. He pulled out his phone and opened a video file. The footage showed his wrist with the watch face in frame, and beside it, his phone screen with a timer app running. Everything looked normal for the first 30 seconds. Then the video flickered. Not a freeze. A flicker, like the frame rate, dropped. When it stabilized, the watch showed a time 7 minutes earlier than it should have. The phone timer was unaffected. I've watched this maybe 100 times, he said. I've analyzed it frame by frame. The gap lasts exactly 1 frame, 1/30th of a second. But when you look at the timestamp metadata, 7 minutes are missing from the file. The file size matches the expected length, including those minutes. They're there in the data, but they're not there in the playback. That's impossible. I know, but it happened, and it keeps happening. What do you think it is? I asked. I don't know, but I think it's connected to the Pritchards. How? Because I found something. He opened the notebook and flipped to a page marked with a yellow tab. Photos were taped to the page. Close-ups of a fire ring, of disturbed soil, of something small and dark half buried in sand. I went back to their second camp at Devil's Kitchen. I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about how clean everything looked, how undisturbed, like they'd just stepped away for a minute and planned to come back. That's what we noted in the report. Right, but I wanted to look deeper. So I went back alone. I dug around the fire ring, sifted through the sand near their tent site. Found this. He pulled a small plastic bag from his pocket and set it on the desk. Inside was a digital watch. Men's style, black band, cracked face. The crystal was spider-webbed with fractures that spread from a central impact point. That's David Pritchard's, I said. I think so. It matches the description his sister gave when I called her. She said he always wore a black Timex, digital face. He'd had it since college, never took it off. I picked up the bag and held it to the light. The watch face was cracked, but the display was still visible. It showed 2:14 a.m. The digits were frozen, unblinking. It stopped, Ezra said. Same time mine froze the first night. I turned the bag over. The back of the watch case had scratches on it, like it had been dragged across rock. But the band was intact, not torn or cut. Someone had removed it normally. Why would he take it off? I asked. Maybe it stopped working and he thought it was broken. Maybe it was driving him crazy. Or maybe something made him take it off. Something made him? I don't know. I'm just saying, what if these time distortions don't just affect equipment? What if they affect people? What if the Pritchards felt what we felt? That pressure, that vibration, and it got worse the longer they stayed. I didn't want to think about that. The idea that the columns or whatever was causing them could influence human behavior made this exponentially more dangerous. Could be coincidence, I said, but I didn't believe it. Could be, but I don't think it is. What are you saying? I'm saying whatever happened to us happened to them first, and they didn't get out. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe the effect was stronger for them. Maybe they were inside the perimeter when it activated, and we only saw it from the outside. You're speculating. I'm connecting evidence. There's a difference. I set the bag down and looked at him. You think they're dead? I think they're gone. I don't know if that's the same thing. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the window frames. A truck rolled past on the main road, kicking up dust. We need to report this, I said. Report what? A broken watch and some missing time? They'll pull me off duty for psych eval. Then what do? We go back, tonight. We find out what's happening in that meadow. That's a bad idea. Probably. But I can't let this go. And I don't think you can either. He was right. I couldn't. The not knowing sat in my chest like a stone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blue column. Every time I checked my watch, I thought about those frozen minutes. Okay, I said. We go back, but we bring backup, and we bring cameras, real ones, not phones. Agreed. We spent the afternoon gathering equipment. 2 high-definition camcorders with fresh batteries and 64 gigabyte memory cards. A handheld GPS unit with track logging enabled. 3 watches synchronized to atomic time via radio signal. 2 headlamps with spare batteries. Emergency beacons in case we needed extraction. A voice recorder to document observations in real time. I also brought something else. a Geiger counter from the maintenance shop. I didn't tell Ezra why. I just wanted to rule out radiation as a factor. The Needles district has uranium deposits. Old mines dot the landscape from the 50s boom. It was a long shot, but I'd learned to test every angle. We met at the station as the sun started its descent. The sky was clear, not a single cloud from horizon to horizon. Perfect conditions according to Ezra's patterns. The temperature was already dropping. It would hit freezing by midnight. "You sure about this?" I asked, as we loaded gear into his truck. "No, but I need to know. We both do. If something happens, we leave, no hesitation. We document what we can and we get out. Agreed?" "Agreed." We left the station at 7 p.m. and drove to Elephant Hill. The sun was setting behind the western spires, painting the rock orange and red and deep purple. Shadows stretched across the valley floor like fingers reaching toward darkness. By the time we parked and shouldered our gear, full dark had settled in. The parking lot was empty except for our truck. No other vehicles. No other hikers. We were alone in a district that covered over 100 square miles of maze-like canyons and stone towers. "Same route," Ezra said. "Straight to Chesler Park. We set up position on the north edge and wait. If we see the light, we document. We don't approach." "Agreed." "And if the watches stop, we leave immediately, no argument." I tested the Geiger counter. Normal background radiation. About 0.1 microsieverts per hour. Typical for this elevation and geology. I clipped it to my belt and made sure the audio alarm was enabled. If radiation spiked, I'd know immediately. We moved fast through the joint trail. Our headlamps cut narrow tunnels through the darkness. The rock walls rose invisible around us. Their presence felt more than seen. The slot was tighter than I remembered. Every few steps, my pack scraped against sandstone. The temperature dropped as we descended. My breath came out in visible puffs. The cold had a different quality down in the slots. It pooled and concentrated, turning the narrow passages into refrigerators. We reached Devil's Kitchen and paused. Ezra swept his light across the alcove where the Pritchards had camped. The sand showed boot prints from our previous searches. Old now, partially filled by wind-blown dust. The fire ring sat undisturbed. "You want to check the area again?" I asked. "No, I've been through it a dozen times. There's nothing else here." We continued north. The trail climbed out of the slot and opened into broader terrain. Scattered juniper grew between boulders. The earth was packed hard, showing little sign of passage. We were moving through country that saw maybe 100 visitors a year, most of them concentrated on the main loop trails. At 9:15 p.m., we crested a low rise and Chesler Park spread before us. The meadow was a void of darkness against the slightly lighter sky. Stars emerged overhead as our eyes adjusted. Thousands of them. The Milky Way cutting across the center of the sky like a road. We found our spot. The same cluster of boulders on the north edge where we'd set up before. The rocks were still there, unchanged, patient. We arranged the cameras on small tripods, both units facing south across the open grass. I checked the Geiger counter again, still normal. I set the voice recorder on a rock and pressed record. "March 23rd, 9:42 p.m., I said quietly. "Chesler Park, Needles District. Nora Flanders and Ezra Reddick conducting observation. Conditions clear, temperature approximately 34 degrees Fahrenheit. No wind, visibility excellent." We synchronized our watches. 9:42 p.m. All three matched perfectly. I made a note of it in my field book. Ezra did the same in his log. Then we waited. The silence was immediate and total, not gradual like before. It was as if the moment we stopped moving, the desert stopped with us. No insects, no wind, no distant coyotes, nothing. "It's starting," Ezra whispered. "Not yet, just natural quiet. Doesn't feel natural." He was right. This wasn't the peaceful silence you find in wilderness areas. This was absence, like sound had been removed from the air. At 10:15 p.m., nothing had happened. The meadow stayed quiet. The stars stayed bright. Our watches kept normal time. I checked the Geiger counter, still 112 microsieverts. I recorded an update on the voice recorder. At 10:45 p.m., my ears popped. Just once. A pressure shift so subtle I almost missed it. But when I looked at Ezra, he was touching his jaw like he'd felt it too. "You feel that?" I asked. "Yeah, pressure change." I checked the cameras, both recording, both showing normal footage of the empty meadow. I checked my watch. 10:46 p.m. Still moving. At 11 p.m., I started to think we'd wasted the trip. At 11:37 p.m., the air pressure changed. It was the same sensation as before, a weight pressing down, making my ears pop and my chest tighten. Ezra felt it too. He sat up straighter and checked his watch. "Still running," he said. "Mine too." The stars flickered. This time, I was ready for it. I kept my eyes on the sky and saw it clearly. The stars dimmed, came back, dimmed again, like something was passing between us and them, something large enough to block light from objects trillions of miles away. Then the column appeared. It stood in the center of the meadow, maybe 100 yards from our position. The same pale blue light, vertical and solid, no source, no shadow. Both cameras were recording. I checked the screens. Both showed the column clearly. "We're getting it," I whispered. Ezra didn't respond. He was staring at his watch. I looked at mine. 11:37 p.m. The second hand had stopped. The column moved. Not toward us this time. It shifted east, relocating in an instant, and a second column appeared beside it. Then a third. 3 columns of light standing in the meadow, evenly spaced, perfectly still. The pressure in my chest increased. I could feel my pulse in my temples. My breath came shallow and fast. "Nora," Ezra said. His voice was tight. "Look at the GPS." I pulled the unit from my pack and checked the screen. The coordinates were jumping. 1 second we were at Chesler Park. The next second the unit said we were 15 miles north, then 30 miles west, then back at Chesler Park. "It's scrambling," I said. "Everything's scrambling." He was right. The cameras were still recording, but the footage on the screens was distorted. The image flickered and pixelated, showing fragmented views of the meadow that didn't match what I was seeing with my eyes. The 3 columns began to pulse. Not a strobe. A slow, rhythmic brightening and dimming. Each pulse lasted about 3 seconds, and with each pulse I felt something in my chest. A vibration, a resonance. "We need to leave," I said. "Not yet. Ezra, we're documenting this. That's why we came. We've got enough. I want to see what happens." The columns moved again, all 3 at once. They shifted closer, forming a triangle around our position. Now we were inside their perimeter. The closest one was 30 yards away. I grabbed Ezra's arm. "We're leaving, now." He didn't argue this time. We packed the cameras, shouldered our gear, and moved. We headed north toward the trail, walking fast, but not running. I didn't want to trigger a chase response if that was even possible. The columns didn't follow. They held their positions and continued pulsing. The vibration in my chest grew stronger. I could feel it in my bones. We hit the trail and dropped into the slot. The rock walls closed around us. I checked my watch, still frozen at 11:37. "Keep moving," Ezra said. We moved. The slot canyon swallowed us. Rock walls rose on both sides, close enough to touch with outstretched arms. Our headlamps threw hard shadows that jumped with each step. I kept my breathing steady and my pace controlled. Running in a slot is a good way to catch a boot and break an ankle. We needed to move fast without being stupid. Behind us, the sky above the slot flickered again. The blue light from the columns reflected off the rock, bouncing down the narrow passage like water filling a channel. The vibration in my chest shifted to a hum I could hear. Low frequency, steady rhythm, like a generator buried somewhere deep in the earth. "You hear that?" I asked. "Yeah. It's following us. I know." The trail twisted left, then right, then dropped over a small ledge we had to scramble down. My pack caught on an overhang and I had to yank it free. Ezra went first and reached back to steady me as I lowered myself. My boots hit solid ground and we kept moving. The hum grew louder. Not by much, but enough that I could feel it in my teeth now. The kind of sensation you get standing too close to high-voltage power lines. My skin prickled. The hair on my forearms stood up. Ezra checked his watch. "Still frozen. Don't think about it. Just move." We climbed out of the slot and crossed a low saddle dotted with juniper. The truck was visible now, a dark shape against the horizon. Half a mile, maybe less. I risked a glance back. The columns were gone, but something else had taken their place. A light moved through the spires behind us. Not blue this time, white, bright enough that I had to squint. It moved horizontally, weaving between the rock formations like it was searching, like it was tracking. "Ezra, I see it. It's coming. We're almost there. Don't stop." We covered the last quarter mile in minutes that felt like hours. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. The white light stayed behind us, never closing the distance but never falling back. Always there. Always watching. We reached the truck. Ezra fumbled with the keys, dropped them, grabbed them again. He unlocked the door and we threw our gear into the back seat. He started the engine. The headlights came on, cutting through the dark. The white light stopped at the edge of the parking area. It hovered there, maybe 50 yards away, just beyond the reach of our headlights. Now that it was still, I could see it more clearly. It wasn't a spotlight, it wasn't a beam, it was a sphere. Perfectly round, about the size of a basketball, glowing white-hot without producing heat. "What is that?" I asked. "I don't know, and I don't care. We're gone." He put the truck in gear and we rolled forward, slowly at first, then faster as the road opened up. The sphere didn't follow. It stayed where it was, hovering in the empty lot, watching us leave. I kept my eyes on the side mirror until we rounded the first curve and lost line of sight. My hands were shaking. My mouth was dry. I checked my watch. The second hand was moving again. 12:03 a.m. We'd lost 26 minutes this time. Ezra drove in silence. His jaw was clenched. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. We didn't speak until we reached the paved road and turned north toward the ranger station. "What just happened?" I finally asked. "I have no idea. We recorded it. We have proof. Maybe, if the cameras worked, if the footage isn't corrupted like everything else. We have to check. We will, but not here. Not tonight." We reached the station and parked. The building was dark. Paul's truck was gone. We went inside and locked the door behind us. Ezra set the cameras on the desk and we both stared at them like they might explode. "You want to do the honors?" he asked. "Let's both look." I pulled out my laptop and connected the first camera. The screen came to life and I opened the video file. The playback started normally. Chesler Park at night. Stars overhead. Empty meadow. Then the columns appeared. The footage was clean, perfectly clear. All 3 columns visible, pulsing in rhythm. The cameras had captured everything. The movement, the relocation, the triangle formation. It was all there. "We have it," I said. "Keep watching." I did. The footage continued for another 2 minutes. Then the image flickered. The screen went black for exactly 1 second. When it came back, the columns were gone and the meadow was empty. "Go back," Ezra said, frame by frame. I scrubbed through the footage slowly. At the moment the columns disappeared, the timestamp jumped. 11:37:42 to 11:51:19. 13 minutes and 37 seconds. Gone. "It happened in the recording too," I said. "Same as my phone video. Whatever's causing the time loss is affecting the cameras. That doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense." I checked the second camera. Same result. Clean footage, clear columns, then a black frame and a timestamp jump. We sat there for a long time, staring at the laptop screen. Outside, the wind picked up and threw sand against the windows. A coyote called in the distance. Normal desert sounds, normal night. Except nothing felt normal anymore. "We have to report this," I said. "To who? And say what?" "To the superintendent, to law enforcement, to someone who can authorize a real investigation. You think they'll believe us? We have video evidence. We have video evidence of lights in the desert and missing timestamps. That's not proof of anything except equipment malfunction. You don't believe that." "No, but I'm not the one who needs convincing." I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. My head ached. My eyes burned. I wanted to sleep for a week. "What about the Pritchards?" I asked. "What about them? Do you think they're dead?" Ezra was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think they saw what we saw. I think they experienced what we experienced. And I think whatever's out there took them. Took them where? I don't know, but I don't think it killed them. At least not in a way we'd understand. Then where are they? Somewhere we can't reach. Somewhere time doesn't work the same way." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he was jumping to conclusions, that there had to be a rational explanation. But I couldn't, because deep down, I thought he was right. We spent the rest of the night at the station. Neither of us slept. We just sat in the office, drinking coffee and reviewing the footage over and over, looking for details we might have missed. At dawn, I made a decision. "I'm filing a report," I said. "Official channels. I'll include the video, the watch, the GPS logs, all of it. They can do with it what they want. You'll get pulled off the field. Probably. But at least it'll be on record. At least someone else will know." "Okay, I'm with you." We wrote the report together. It took 3 hours. We kept it factual, avoided speculation, and let the evidence speak for itself. We attached the video files, the GPS logs, and photos of David Pritchard's watch. I submitted it to the district superintendent at 10 a.m. By noon, we had a response. "Report received, investigation pending. Both officers temporarily reassigned to administrative duties pending review." We were benched. I spent the next 2 weeks in Moab, behind a desk, processing permits and answering phones. Ezra got the same treatment. We weren't allowed back in the field until the investigation concluded. The investigation never concluded. After 3 weeks, the superintendent called me into his office. He was a career NPS administrator, late 50s, competent but cautious. He gestured to a chair and I sat down. "I read your report," he said. "Several times. And I don't know what to do with it. It's documentation of an incident that occurred in the field. It's my job to report it. I understand that. But the incident you're describing doesn't fit any known pattern or explanation. The video is compelling but inconclusive. The time discrepancies could be equipment failure. The missing campers could be coincidence. You think we made it up? I think you experienced something. I don't doubt that. But I need more than anomalous video and missing time to justify the kind of resources a real investigation would require. What about the Pritchards? Still missing. We've expanded the search radius and coordinated with BLM and San Juan County. Nothing yet. Because they're not out there, not in a way we can find. He looked at me for a long moment. I'm not going to include that speculation in any official capacity, but off the record, I believe you. I've worked in these parks for 30 years. I've heard things, seen things that don't make it into reports because there's no box to check for them. Then help us. I can't, not officially, but I'm not going to stop you from looking on your own time. Just keep it quiet. I left his office with more questions than answers. Ezra was waiting outside. What did he say? He asked. He believes us, but he can't help. So we're on our own. Looks like it. We went back to the Needles 3 more times over the next month. Always at night. Always in the same areas. We never saw the columns again. We never saw the sphere. Our watches kept normal time. Our cameras recorded normal footage. Whatever had been there was gone, or dormant, or waiting. Summer came, and the Needles filled with tourists. The case of David and Ann Pritchard went cold. Their families held a memorial service in Denver. The search was officially suspended. Their photos were added to a bulletin board at the ranger station along with a dozen others who'd disappeared in the canyon country over the years. I stayed with the Park Service but transferred to administrative work full-time. I told myself it was for career advancement. Really, I just didn't want to be in the field anymore. Not at night, not alone. Ezra quit in July. He didn't give a reason, just turned in his badge and drove north. I got a postcard from Montana 3 weeks later. It said, "Needed a change. Stay safe." I haven't heard from him since. In September, a family from Texas found a backpack while hiking near Devil's Kitchen. It was half buried in sand under an overhang. Inside were water bottles, a first aid kit, and a driver's license belonging to Ann Pritchard. Law enforcement searched the area again. They found nothing else. No body, no camp, no sign of David, just the pack. The official conclusion was that the Pritchards had gotten separated. One had fallen or gotten injured in an inaccessible area, and the other had died trying to find help. The case was closed. I knew better. A year after the incident, I went back to Chesler Park one last time. It was late October, the anniversary of when Ezra and I first saw the columns. I told myself I was going for closure. To see the place in daylight and prove to myself it was just a meadow, just rock and dirt and sky. I hiked in alone. The weather was clear and cool. The aspens had turned gold, and the air smelled like autumn. I reached the meadow by mid-morning and stood on the north edge where we'd set up the cameras. It looked normal, beautiful even, the kind of place you'd want to camp if you were chasing solitude and stars. I checked my watch, 10:30 a.m. The second hand moved smoothly. Everything functioned as it should. I stayed there for an hour, walking the perimeter, studying the ground, looking for anything that might explain what had happened. I found nothing, no burn marks, no disturbed soil, no evidence that 3 columns of blue light had ever stood in that space, but I felt something. A presence, not threatening, not welcoming, just aware. Like the land itself was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. I left before noon and hiked back to the trailhead without stopping. I didn't look back. I didn't take pictures. I just walked That was the last time I set foot in the Needles. I still work for the Park Service. I'm based in Moab now, coordinating rescue operations for multiple districts. I train new rangers and teach wilderness survival courses. It's good work, important work. But I don't go into the backcountry at night anymore. And I don't work in the Needles. People ask me sometimes why I transferred, why I gave up field work when I was good at it. I tell them I wanted a change. I wanted to focus on administration and training. They accept that answer because it's reasonable. The real answer is harder to explain. I gave up field work because I saw something in Chesler Park that doesn't fit into any framework I was trained to understand. I saw time break. I saw light move in ways that violate physics. I saw evidence of intelligence that operates outside the boundaries of human experience. And I saw what happened to two people who encountered it before we did. David and Ann Pritchard are still listed as missing. Their families still hold out hope that someday a hiker will find remains or gear or something that provides closure. I don't have the heart to tell them that's not going to happen, because I don't think the Pritchards are dead. I think they're somewhere else. Someplace adjacent to this one. Someplace where time works differently and our rules don't apply. I think they walked into something at Chesler Park that pulled them out of sequence. And once you're out of sequence, I don't know if you can come back. The footage Ezra and I recorded still exists. I have copies on an external hard drive in my desk. I've watched it hundreds of times. I've studied every frame, every pixel, every shadow. I've shown it to exactly 3 people. 2 didn't believe it was real. 1 did. The one who believed it was a physicist from the University of Utah. She specializes in temporal mechanics and quantum field theory. I sent her the footage with no context and asked for her opinion. She called me 2 days later. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Does it matter?" "It matters if it's real." "Assume it's real. What am I looking at?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "If it's real, you're looking at a localized distortion in space-time. Something is creating a field effect strong enough to disrupt electromagnetic signals, mechanical timekeeping, and possibly the flow of causality itself. Is that possible? Theoretically? Yes, in practice. I've never seen evidence of it outside controlled laboratory conditions. And even then, we're talking about effects measured in nanoseconds across distances smaller than an atom. This wasn't small, and it lasted minutes. Then either your footage is fabricated or someone has technology that's decades beyond anything publicly known. Or it's not technology. What else would it be? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's still out there." She didn't respond. A few days later, I got an email from her. Subject line, "Further thoughts." The email said, "I showed your footage to a colleague without attribution. He suggested it could be a natural phenomenon related to electromagnetic anomalies in areas with high mineral content. Sandstone formations can act as capacitors under the right conditions. But that doesn't explain the temporal displacement. That requires energy levels orders of magnitude higher than anything geological. If this is real, someone should investigate. But it won't be me. I have tenure to protect. Good luck." I never heard from her again. So that's where I am now. I have evidence that something happened in the Needles. Evidence that time stopped, that light moved in impossible ways, that 2 people disappeared without a trace. But I don't have answers. I don't have explanations. I don't have closure. What I have is memory. I remember standing in Chesler Park at 11:37 p.m. with Ezra beside me and 3 columns of blue light forming a triangle around us. I remember feeling my watch stop and the air pressure change, and that low hum rising up through the ground. I remember running through the slot canyon with white light chasing us. I remember reaching the truck and looking back at that sphere hovering at the edge of the parking lot. And I remember checking my watch when it started again and seeing that we'd lost time we could never account for. Those memories don't fade. They don't soften with distance. They sit in my mind as clear as the day they happened. Sometimes I wonder if David and Ann Pritchard are somewhere wondering the same things. If they're trapped in some pocket of frozen time, watching the same stars, walking the same trails, unable to move forward or back. I hope that's not true. I hope they found a way out, or a way through, or that whatever took them was quick and painless. But I don't believe that. I think they're still there, somewhere in the Needles, somewhere between 2:14 a.m. and 2:06 a.m., caught in a loop that won't release them. And I think if you go to Chesler Park on a clear night in October, if you're there at the right time with the right conditions, you might see what we saw. You might see the columns. You might feel the pressure. You might watch your watch stop and realize that time isn't as fixed as you thought. If that happens, don't try to document it. Don't try to understand it. Don't stand there and wait to see what comes next. Just leave. Turn around, find the trail, and walk back to your vehicle as fast as you can without running. Don't look back. Don't stop. Don't let curiosity override survival instinct. Because once you see it, it sees you. And once it sees you, I don't know if you can ever be invisible again. I still check my watch compulsively. Several times an hour. I've replaced it twice thinking maybe the mechanism was faulty. But it keeps perfect time now. No freezing, no jumping, no missing minutes. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. And I know that somewhere in the Needles, in a meadow surrounded by stone spires under a sky full of stars, time doesn't always flow the way it should. The Pritchards found that out the hard way. Ezra and I were lucky. We got out. We came back to a world where clocks work and cause follows effect, and the laws of physics hold steady. But I don't think everyone does. I think some people step into those frozen minutes and never step out. They're still there, moving through a timeline that diverged from ours, trying to find their way back to a present that moved on without them. That's what I believe happened. That's the only explanation that fits the evidence. And if you think I'm wrong, if you think there's a rational explanation for everything I've described, then I'll ask you this. Why are there so many people missing in the canyon country? Why do the searches come up empty, even when we have dogs and helicopters and thermal imaging? Why do we find abandoned gear with no signs of struggle or predation? Why do watches stop at 2:14 a.m.? I don't have official answers. The Park Service doesn't have answers. The families don't have answers. But I have a theory. And my theory is that the desert keeps secrets. Some of them geological, some of them historical, and some of them temporal. The Needles is a place where time doesn't always cooperate, where the normal rules bend just enough to let something else through, something that watches and waits and occasionally reaches out to touch the people who wander too far from the marked trails. David and Ann Pritchard wandered too far. They encountered something at 2:14 a.m. on March 10th that pulled them out of sequence. Ezra and I came close. We saw the edge of it. We felt its pull, but we got out before it could close around us. Now I live with the knowledge that it's still there, still active, still waiting for the next person who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And there's nothing I can do about it. I filed my report. I documented the evidence. I tried to warn people through official channels. None of it mattered. The case is closed. The investigation is over. The park is open. People still camp at Chesler Park. They still hike the joint trail. They still stand on the overlooks at night and watch the stars. Most of them are fine. Most of them have normal experiences and go home with great photos and good memories. But every few years, someone doesn't come back. And when the search teams go out, they find camps that look undisturbed. They find gear that's neatly packed. They find boot prints that stop for no reason. And sometimes, if they're paying attention, they find watches that stopped at 2:14 a.m. That's my ending. I stayed with the Park Service. I changed my role. I stayed away from the needles at night. And I accepted that there are some things I can't fix or explain or prevent. The frozen minutes are still out there. In the desert, in the dark, in the spaces between seconds where time forgets how to move forward. I just hope you're never there when they happen. Because if you are, you might not make it back. My name is Wes Hartley, and I've driven trucks for 22 years. Mostly regional hauls through Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. I know every highway, every truck stop, every bad stretch of road between Salt Lake City and Flagstaff. I've driven through blizzards that turned I-70 into a skating rink. I've pushed through dust storms on US 191, where visibility dropped to 10 feet. I've dealt with blown tires, failed brakes, and engines that quit in the middle of nowhere. I've never seen anything that made me question what's possible until March 17th of last year. I was running a load from Green River to Monticello, standard route. I take US 191 south through Moab, then keep going another hour to the delivery point. It's a good road, 2 lanes, well-maintained, light traffic at night. I've driven it hundreds of times. That night, I left Green River just after 9 p.m. The weather was clear and cold, no wind. The kind of night where you can see stars all the way to the horizon. My truck was running clean. Full fuel, fresh oil change, new drive tires. Everything was dialed in. I passed through Moab around 10:15 p.m., grabbed coffee at a gas station on the south end of town, and topped off the tank even though I didn't need to. Old habit. Never pass up fuel when you're running distance loads. South of Moab, the road cuts through open desert with the La Salle Mountains rising to the east. During the day, it's beautiful country. Red rock, sagebrush, wide sky. At night, it's just darkness broken by your headlights and the occasional pair of eyes reflecting back from an animal on the shoulder. I was about 12 miles south of Moab when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a reflection, something catching my headlights and throwing a line across the pavement. But when I adjusted my angle, the line stayed where it was. It wasn't reflecting, it was there. A thin strip of light, maybe 2 inches wide, running perpendicular across both lanes. It glowed pale blue-white, the color of an LED. It didn't pulse or flicker. It was steady. And it was moving, not fast, maybe 5 miles an hour. It slid across the asphalt from the shoulder on my right toward the center line, smooth and constant, like someone was dragging a lit wire across the road. I eased off the throttle and leaned forward against the steering wheel. The line continued moving left. When it reached the center line, it didn't stop. It kept going, sliding into the oncoming lane and toward the far shoulder. Then it stopped. Just froze in place, still glowing, still perfectly straight, and it sat there hovering maybe 3 inches above the road surface. I slowed to 30 miles per hour. My headlights hit the line full on, and I could see it clearly now. It had depth. Not much, but enough to tell it wasn't painted or projected. It existed in 3-dimensional space, a narrow ribbon of light suspended just above the pavement. I checked my mirrors. No vehicles behind me. No headlights ahead. I was alone on the road. The line started moving again. This time it slid back toward my side of the highway. Faster now, maybe 10 miles per hour. It moved with purpose, like it was searching for something. I tapped my brakes. The line stopped. I don't know why I did that. Instinct, maybe. Or some part of my brain trying to test if the line was reacting to me. When I stopped braking, the line started moving again. "What the hell?" I said out loud. My voice sounded strange in the cab, too loud, like the space had gotten smaller. The line slid directly into my lane and stopped 30 feet ahead of my front bumper. I brought the truck to a full stop and put it in neutral. The engine idled. The dashboard lights glowed their usual orange and green. Everything was normal, except for the line of light sitting on the road in front of me. I grabbed my phone from the cup holder and tried to take a photo. The screen flickered when I opened the camera app. The image showed static for a second, then went black. I closed the app and reopened it. Same result. Black screen, no function. I set the phone down and looked up. The line was closer, not by much, maybe 10 feet, but I hadn't seen it move. 1 second it was 30 feet away. The next, it was 20. My chest tightened. I shifted into first gear and gave the truck some throttle. I moved forward slowly, keeping my speed at walking pace. The line stayed where it was. As I approached, I could feel something. Not heat, not cold, just a presence, a weight in the air that pressed against the windshield. When my front bumper was 5 feet from the line, it moved again. It slid left, gliding out of my lane and onto the shoulder. I kept rolling. As I passed the spot where it had been, I looked out my driver's side window. The line was pacing me. It moved parallel to the truck, maintaining the same distance. 3 inches above the dirt shoulder. No dust kicked up. No disturbance to the ground. It just glided along like it was on rails. I accelerated to 40 miles per hour. The line kept pace. I pushed to 50, still there, matching my speed exactly. It didn't lag. It didn't pull ahead. It stayed locked to my position. My radio crackled. I'd been listening to a country station out of Moab. The music cut out and static filled the cab. Not normal static. This had a pattern to it, a rhythm. Like Morse code, but faster. I reached for the dial to change the station. Before I touched it, the radio went silent. Complete dead air. Then the display started changing. The station frequency was 94.7 FM. I watched the numbers shift, 9, 4, 7, then they reversed, 7, 4, 9, then they scrambled. Random digits cycling through combinations that didn't exist. 127.3, 88 no, 45.9. I turned the radio off. The display stayed lit. The numbers kept changing. I looked back at the shoulder. The line was still there, still pacing me. And now I could see something else. The ground where it passed showed no shadow. My headlights were hitting the area at an angle that should have cast a shadow from the elevated line. But there was nothing. The light didn't interact with the surface below it. That's when I knew this wasn't something I understood. This wasn't a reflection, or a drone, or some piece of equipment left on the road. This was something else entirely. I grabbed my CB radio. Truckers use Channel 19 for road conditions and traffic updates. I keyed the mic. Anyone on 191 south of Moab, this is southbound 191 at mile marker 1 and 18. You got your ears on? Static answered. Then a voice broke through. Male, older, gravelly. Go ahead, southbound. You see anything unusual on the road tonight? Any lights or equipment or anything out of place? Negative. Road's clear from my end. What are you seeing? I didn't know how to answer that. If I said a line of light that's following my truck, he'd think I was drunk or hallucinating. Just thought I saw something, I said. Probably nothing, thanks. 10-4. Safe travels. I hung up the mic. The line continued to pace me. We were approaching a long straightaway that runs for about 3 miles through flat desert. No curves, no hills, just pavement and open ground. I could see the entire stretch lit up by my headlights. The line slid back onto the pavement. It moved into my lane again and stopped 50 feet ahead. Then it began to pulse. Not the whole thing, just sections of it. The pulses traveled along its length from right to left, like a wave moving through water. I slowed down. The pulses quickened. I sped up, they slowed. It was responsive, reactive, like it was communicating. "Okay," I said to the empty cab. "What do you want?" The line pulsed once, bright and sustained. Then it split. 2 lines now, identical, each about 2 inches wide. They separated, one sliding left and one sliding right, until they were positioned at the edges of both lanes. They formed a corridor, a path marked by light. I had a choice. I could stop the truck, turn around, and head back to Moab. Call the sheriff, report what I was seeing, and let someone else deal with it. Or I could keep going. Drive between the lines and see what happened. I checked my mirrors again. Still no other vehicles. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 10:47 p.m. I drove forward. The lines paced me on both sides. They held their positions, perfectly parallel, moving at my speed. The radio display continued its random cycling. The numbers blurred together. Then the display went dark completely. No light, no function. The temperature inside the cab dropped. I felt it immediately. My breath came out in a visible cloud. I turned the heater dial. Nothing happened. The air stayed cold. Not freezing, but wrong. Like someone had opened a window to winter even though it was March and the outside temp was in the mid-40s. Ahead, maybe a quarter mile, I saw something else. A third line. This one was brighter and oriented differently. Instead of running across the road, it ran along it. A vertical strip of light standing at the side of the highway, maybe 10 feet tall. As I got closer, I could see it more clearly. It wasn't just a line, it was a column, narrow at the base, maybe 6 inches wide, expanding slightly as it rose, the same pale blue-white color as the lines pacing my truck. It stood motionless on the shoulder, perfectly straight, like a post made of light. The 2 lines guiding me suddenly accelerated. They shot forward and converged on the column. When they reached it, they merged. The column brightened for a moment, then dimmed back to its original intensity. I was 200 feet away now, then 100, then 50. The column began to move. Not sliding like the lines. It rose, straight up, maintaining its vertical orientation. It climbed until it was 20 feet off the ground, then stopped. It hovered there, silent and still, directly above my lane. I should have stopped. I should have braked and reversed and gotten the hell out of there. But I didn't. I kept my speed steady and drove under it. The moment I passed beneath the column, everything changed. The sound came first. A hum. Low frequency, deep enough that I felt it more than heard it. It came up through the seat, through the steering wheel, through the pedals under my feet. My entire truck vibrated with it. The rear-view mirror buzzed against its mount. The change in my cup holder rattled. Then the light changed. My headlights were still on, but they weren't illuminating the road the way they should. The beams looked shorter, more contained, like they were hitting a wall just beyond my front bumper even though there was nothing there. I checked the speedometer. The needle was stuck at 52 miles per hour. But I could feel the truck slowing. The engine note dropped. The vibration from the tires changed pitch. I was decelerating without touching the brakes. The column was behind me now, visible in my side mirror. It remained hovering above the road, unmoving. But something new was happening ahead. The highway in front of me looked wrong. The white line marking the shoulder was too bright. The yellow center line looked faded. The texture of the asphalt seemed different. Smoother. Like it had been repaved recently, even though I knew it hadn't. I drove this road twice a week. I knew every crack and patch. My speed dropped to 40. then 30. The engine was still running, but the truck wasn't responding to throttle input. I pressed the accelerator. Nothing. I tried the brakes. They worked, but I was already moving so slowly that they barely mattered. At 20 miles per hour, the radio came back to life. Not the station I'd been listening to. This was something else. A voice, male, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Not Spanish or Navajo or any of the indigenous languages I'd heard in the Southwest. This was different. The cadence was wrong. The sounds didn't match patterns I knew. The voice spoke for maybe 10 seconds. Then it cut out and was replaced by a tone. A single, sustained note, high-pitched and piercing. It lasted 5 seconds, then stopped. Silence. My speed dropped to 10 miles per hour. The truck was barely moving now. I could feel it coasting, momentum carrying it forward while the engine provided no power. I checked the dashboard. The tachometer was reading 1,200 RPM. Too high for idle, too low for 10 miles per hour in first gear. Then the truck stopped completely. Not a gradual stop. Just stopped. Like someone had grabbed it and held it in place. The engine was still running. The lights were still on. But the truck would not move forward. I tried shifting to neutral, then back to first. No response. I tried second gear. Nothing. The transmission engaged, but the wheels wouldn't turn. I looked in the rearview mirror. The column was still there, maybe 200 feet back. Still hovering. Still glowing that pale blue-white. Ahead, the road stretched into darkness. Empty. No lights, no movement. Just asphalt and desert and stars. I picked up the CB mic again. Keyed it. Nothing. No static, no carrier wave, just dead air. I tried my cell phone. The screen was black and wouldn't power on even though it had been at 70% battery when I took the failed photo. I sat there in the driver's seat, engine idling, headlights illuminating nothing, completely alone. The temperature dropped further. I could see frost forming on the inside of the windshield. Thin crystals spreading from the edges toward the center. I touched the glass. It was ice cold, but the heater was still running. I could hear the fan. I could feel air coming from the vents. Warm air. It just wasn't having any effect. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned my head to the right, looking out the passenger window. A figure stood on the shoulder about 30 feet from the truck. Human-shaped, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, maybe 7 feet. The arms hung lower than they should, ending below where the knees would be on a person. The head was elongated. Not grotesque, just stretched. And it was backlit by a faint glow that came from nowhere. I stared at it. It didn't move. It just stood there, facing my direction. I couldn't see features. It was silhouetted against the glow, but I could feel it watching me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My breath came fast and shallow. Every instinct told me to run. But I was trapped. The truck wouldn't move. The doors were locked, but locks didn't feel like enough. The figure took a step forward. Smooth, gliding, like it was walking on ice. Another step, then another. It covered ground faster than it should have. Each step seemed to carry it 5 feet instead of 2. I reached for the door lock and hit it again, even though it was already locked. The click was loud in the silence. The figure stopped. It tilted its head. The movement was subtle, but deliberate, like it had heard the sound and was considering it. Then it raised one arm. The movement was slow, controlled. The arm extended toward the truck, toward me. The hand at the end was wrong, too many fingers, or not enough. The glow made it hard to tell. My chest felt like it was being compressed. The pressure was back. The same sensation I'd felt when approaching the line, but stronger now. I couldn't take a full breath. My vision started to narrow at the edges. The figure's hand stopped rising when it was level with its shoulder. It held that position for 3 seconds. Then it dropped the arm back to its side and turned away. It walked toward the desert. Not fast, just steady. And with each step, the glow around it faded. By the time it was 100 feet from the road, the glow was gone. The figure was gone. Just darkness and empty desert. The pressure in my chest released. I gasped and pulled in air. The frost on the windshield began to melt. The temperature in the cab started to rise, and the radio came back. Not static this time. Music. The same country station I'd been listening to before. The same song, even, like it had been paused and was now continuing from where it left off. The truck lurched forward. Not violently, just a sudden return of power. The wheels rolled, the speedometer needle jumped. I was moving again. 10 miles per hour, then 20, then 30. I accelerated carefully, feeding throttle in small increments. The truck responded normally. The transmission shifted through gears the way it should. The engine note was clean. Everything functioned as if nothing had happened. I checked the mirrors. The column was gone. The shoulder was empty. The road behind me looked normal, just pavement and darkness. I pushed the speed up to 55 and held it there. My hands were shaking. My shirt was damp with sweat despite the cold. I wanted distance. I wanted to be anywhere but that stretch of highway. I drove for 10 minutes without seeing anything unusual. The road was normal. The radio played normal music. The dashboard displayed normal readings. But I kept checking the mirrors every few seconds. Kept scanning the shoulders. Kept waiting for the lines to return. They didn't. At 11:02 p.m., I passed through Wilson Arch, a natural sandstone span that crosses over the highway. It's a landmark. I've driven under it 1,000 times. Seeing it that night felt like crossing a threshold, like I'd passed from one space back into another. I pulled into a truck stop in Monticello 40 minutes later. The lot was half full. I parked between 2 other semis and killed the engine. For a long moment I just sat there, listening to the ticking of cooling metal, watching the lights of the truck stop reflect off my windshield. I grabbed my phone. It powered on normally. Full battery, 70%, like it had never died. I opened the camera app. It worked fine. I took a picture of the dashboard. Clear image, no static. I checked the clock on my phone. 11:47 p.m. Then I checked the dashboard clock. 11:46 p.m. 1 minute difference. I synced both clocks to my phone every week. They should have matched. But the dashboard clock was behind by 1 minute. I sat with that for a while. 1 minute, not much. Barely worth noticing under normal circumstances. But I noticed. Because I knew both clocks had been synchronized. And I knew what I'd experienced had felt longer than 1 minute. The stop. The cold. The figure. All of it had to have taken at least 5 minutes, maybe 10. But according to my clocks, only 1 minute was missing. I got out of the truck and walked into the truck stop. Bought coffee and a sandwich I didn't eat. Stood under fluorescent lights and listened to normal sounds. Other drivers talking. The cashier scanning items. The hum of refrigeration units. Everything was normal. Aggressively normal. Like the world was trying to convince me nothing had happened. But something had happened. I'd seen it, felt it. And I had the missing minute to prove it. I didn't drive the rest of the night. I slept in the cab, fitfully, waking every hour to check the mirrors and make sure nothing was outside. By dawn, I felt like I'd been awake the entire time. I delivered my load at 7 a.m. The receiver signed off on it, and I headed back north. Daylight made everything feel safer. The road was just a road. The desert was just desert. Nothing moved that shouldn't. Nothing glowed. But when I reached the stretch of highway where I'd seen the lines, I slowed down. I studied the pavement, looked for marks or burn patterns or any physical evidence that something had been there. I found nothing. The road looked the same as it always did. 2 lanes, faded yellow center line, cracked asphalt. I stopped on the shoulder near where I thought the column had been, got out and walked the area. The ground showed tire tracks from vehicles, boot prints, animal prints, normal signs of normal traffic. No indentations, no scorched earth, no residue. I took photos anyway. The road, the shoulder, the surrounding desert. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I documented it because that's what you do when something doesn't make sense. You gather evidence, you build a record. I got back in the truck and continued north. Made it to Moab by 9 a.m. I needed to talk to someone. Someone who worked the area. Someone who might have seen something similar. I pulled into the Grand County Sheriff's Office in Moab just after 9:30 a.m. The building is a low brick structure on the west side of town, set back from the main road with a parking lot that's usually half empty. I'd been there before. Minor accidents, paperwork for overweight loads, the usual interactions truckers have with local law enforcement. I sat in my truck for a few minutes before going in. My hands were still shaking slightly, not from fear exactly, more from the weight of what I was about to do. Once I walked through that door and filed a report, there'd be a record. My name attached to claims about lights and figures and missing time. I'd seen enough TV to know how these things went. People who report UFOs get labeled. They lose credibility. Their employers start asking questions. But I also knew I couldn't keep this to myself. If something was happening on that highway, if other drivers were at risk, someone needed to know. Someone with authority needed to start paying attention. I grabbed my phone and the folder I'd prepared. Inside were printouts of my delivery logs, fuel receipts, and a handwritten timeline of the events. I'd spent the morning creating it, writing down every detail while it was still fresh. Times, distances, descriptions. Everything I could remember. The front entrance had a security camera above the door. I looked up at it as I walked in, wondering if someone was watching. If they could see the tension in my shoulders, or the way I kept glancing at my phone like it might offer an escape route. Inside, the lobby was quiet. Beige walls, bulletin board with community notices, a few plastic chairs arranged near a window that looked out at the parking lot. The smell hit me immediately. That particular blend of coffee, cleaning solution, and old paperwork that seems universal to government buildings. I approached the front desk. A woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain looked up from a computer. Her nameplate read Donna Martinez. She had the efficient, slightly weary expression of someone who'd been answering questions for decades. "Help you?" she asked. "I need to report something unusual I saw on 191 last night, south of town." "What kind of unusual?" I hesitated. This was the moment. Once I said it out loud to someone official, there was no taking it back. "Lights," I said. "Unusual lights. And other things I can't explain." She studied me for a moment. Her eyes moved from my face to my clothes. Clean jeans, company shirt with my name patch, work boots. I probably looked like what I was, a working driver, not someone chasing attention or making up stories for entertainment. "You been drinking?" she asked. Direct. No judgment in her tone, just procedure. "No, ma'am. Haven't had a drink in 8 years. Sober driver, clean CDL, current DOT medical card. I can show you my logs if you need verification." Something in my answer satisfied her. She nodded and picked up a phone. "Have a seat. Someone will be with you." I sat in a plastic chair near the window and waited. The chair was uncomfortable, the kind designed to discourage people from staying too long. I set my folder on my lap and checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. The world was continuing normally while I sat here preparing to sound like someone who'd lost touch with reality. Through the window, I could see my truck in the parking lot. 22 years of driving that rig, or ones like it. Hundreds of thousands of miles. I'd seen storms, accidents, breakdowns. I'd dealt with drunk drivers and road rage and animals running across highways. I knew the difference between normal dangers and something else entirely. What I'd experienced last night was something else. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I started to wonder if they'd forgotten about me or decided I wasn't worth their time. But then a side door opened and a deputy emerged. He was in his late 30s, maybe 40, fit, with short-cropped hair that was graying at the temples. His uniform was crisp, his boots polished. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd handled difficult situations before. His name tag read Pierce. "I'm Deputy Kellen Pierce," he said, extending a hand. I stood and shook it. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "Wes Hartley. You wanted to report something?" "Yes, sir. On 191 last night, between Moab and Monticello, I saw something I can't explain." "Let's talk in here." He led me down a hallway to a small interview room. I'd been in rooms like this before, not for anything serious, just routine traffic stops that required paperwork. The setup was always the same. Table bolted to the floor, 3 chairs that didn't match, walls painted industrial beige, no windows, 1 door, a camera in the corner with a red light that wasn't on. Pierce gestured to a chair, and I sat. The folder rested on my lap. He took the seat across from me and pulled out a notepad, clicked a pen. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Before we start," he said, "I want you to know this conversation is being recorded. Audio only. Standard procedure for all incident reports. You okay with that?" "That's fine." "Good. Let's start with basic information. Full name, address, date of birth." I gave him the details. He wrote them down in careful block letters. Then he looked up. "Now, tell me what happened. Start from the beginning. Take your time." I opened the folder and pulled out my timeline, set it on the table between us. I made notes this morning, while everything was still fresh. Times, locations, what I saw. Would it be easier if I just walked you through this? He glanced at the paper. "That's fine, but I'd also like to hear it in your own words. Tell it like a story. What you were doing, what you saw, how you reacted. The details matter." So I told him everything. The line of light sliding across the highway, the way it moved, the way it reacted to my speed, the column that rose above the road, the temperature drop, the radio malfunction, the figure on the shoulder with proportions that were wrong. I kept my voice steady, made eye contact, didn't rush through the hard parts or skip over details that made me sound unstable. I presented it as a sequence of events, factual and chronological. Pierce took notes the whole time. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. Just let me talk. When I finished, he looked up from his notepad and met my eyes. The silence stretched for a moment. Then he said, "You been drinking?" I'd expected that question again. "No, sir, not a drop." "Drugs? Prescription or otherwise?" "No, sir, nothing. I'm on a hair follicle testing protocol for my company. Random screenings. I can't afford to have anything in my system." "Medical conditions? Seizures, migraines, anything that could cause visual disturbances?" "No, I'm healthy. I have to be for my CDL medical certification. I get checked every 2 years. Blood pressure, vision, hearing, all of it. My last exam was 6 months ago. Passed with no issues." He made a note. "How much sleep did you get before this run?" 8 hours. I keep a logbook. DOT regulations require it. I can show you the last month if you need to see the pattern. That won't be necessary right now." He set his pen down and leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Hartley, I appreciate you coming in. I can tell this experience was significant for you. But I need to ask some difficult questions, and I want you to understand they're not about doubting your credibility. They're about building a complete picture, okay?" "Understood." "Have you ever experienced anything like this before? Anywhere, anytime?" "No, never." "Have you been under unusual stress recently? Work problems, family issues, financial concerns?" "No more than normal. I've got bills like everyone else, but nothing that would make me hallucinate." "That's not what I'm suggesting. Stress can affect perception in subtle ways. It can make us more likely to misinterpret ambiguous stimuli. A shadow becomes something else. A reflection becomes something unusual. I know the difference between a shadow and what I saw. I'm sure you do." He picked up the timeline I'd written, studied it. "You said you took photos this morning. Can I see them?" I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery, swiped through the images. The empty highway, the shoulder, the desert. The same photos I'd reviewed a dozen times, looking for something I might have missed. Pierce looked at each one carefully, zoomed in on a few. Then he handed the phone back. "These show normal road conditions." "I know. I took them after sunrise. Whatever was there last night was gone by morning." "Did you take any photos while the event was happening?" "I tried. My phone wouldn't function. The camera app went black. The phone died completely, even though it had 70% battery. It didn't work again until after the column disappeared." "But it's working fine now." "Yes, sir. Perfectly normal, like nothing ever happened." He was quiet for a moment, tapping his pen against the notepad. "Mr. Hartley, I'm going to be straight with you. I've worked this county for 12 years. I've seen accidents, strange weather, wildlife, drones, military exercises, you name it. What you're describing doesn't match anything in my experience or training. I know how it sounds." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you sound like a credible witness describing an incredible event. And that puts me in a difficult position. I believe you experienced something. I believe it frightened you. But without physical evidence or corroborating witnesses, there's not much I can investigate." I felt my frustration rising, but kept it in check. "I understand that, but I need to know I'm not the only one. Have there been other reports, other drivers seeing things on that stretch of road?" I told him everything. The line of light, the way it moved, the column, the figure on the shoulder, the missing minute. I kept my tone even and factual. I didn't embellish. I didn't speculate. Just the sequence of events as they happened. Pierce took notes the whole time. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he looked up from his pad and met my eyes. "You been drinking?" he asked. "No, sir. Not a drop." "Drugs, prescription or otherwise?" "No, sir. Nothing." "Medical conditions? Seizures, migraines, anything that could cause visual disturbances?" "No, I'm healthy. I have to be for my CDL medical certification. I get checked every 2 years. How much sleep did you get before this run?" 8 hours. I keep a log. DOT regulations." He nodded and made another note. "You said you took photos. Can I see them?" I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. The photos of the empty highway, the shoulder, the desert. I swiped through them. Pierce looked at each one carefully. "These show normal road conditions," he said. "I know. I took them this morning. Whatever was there last night was gone by dawn." "Did you take any photos while the event was happening?" "I tried. My phone wouldn't function. Camera app went black. The phone died completely until after the column disappeared. But it's working fine now." "Yes, sir." He handed the phone back. Mr. Hartley, I'm going to be straight with you. I've worked this county for 12 years. I've seen accidents, strange weather, wildlife, drones, you name it. What you're describing doesn't match anything in my experience. I know how it sounds. Do you? I sound like someone who's making excuses for falling asleep at the wheel or hallucinating, but I'm not. This happened, and I need someone to take it seriously. Pierce set his pen down. I'm taking you seriously. But what you're asking me to do is file a report about unidentified lights and a figure that disappeared into the desert. Without physical evidence or corroborating witnesses, there's not much I can investigate. What about other reports? Has anyone else seen anything unusual on that stretch of road? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Off the record?" "Sure." He set his pen down and leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice even though we were alone in the room. "We've had a few calls over the years. Not many. Maybe 1 or 2 a year, lights in the sky, strange sounds, equipment malfunctions. Most people don't file official reports. They just call to ask if we've heard anything. We tell them no and they move on." "What about recently? Last few months?" He hesitated. I could see him weighing how much to tell me. Finally, he said, "There was a call 3 weeks ago. Driver heading south at night saw lights pacing his vehicle. Said they followed him for about 10 miles, then disappeared. He didn't stop. Just called when he got to Monticello. I took the call myself. Did you follow up?" "I drove the route the next day. Daylight. Didn't find anything. No marks on the road, no equipment, no physical traces. I filed it as unable to substantiate. That's the category we use when there's a report but no evidence. So I'm not the first." "No, but you're the first to give this level of detail, and the first to mention a figure. That's what concerns me most." "Why?" "Because lights can be explained away. Drones, aircraft, atmospheric phenomena, even equipment malfunctions have rational causes. But a figure? Something that moves toward you. That suggests intelligence, intent. And if something with intent is operating on that highway, we have a responsibility to understand what it is." I felt a small measure of relief. He wasn't dismissing me. He was taking it seriously even if he couldn't officially investigate. "What do you think it is?" I asked. Pierce picked up his pen again and tapped it against the pad. "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to say military. Black budget stuff. Experimental aircraft or surveillance systems. The government runs operations all over the Southwest. White Sands is in New Mexico, but they have ranges and test corridors throughout the region. But the behavior doesn't match military operations. Military tests follow protocols. They notify local authorities, even if they don't give us details. They establish no-fly zones and temporary flight restrictions. And they don't typically operate directly over public highways where civilian vehicles are present. Too much liability. So, if it's not military, what's left? I don't have an answer for that, and that's what bothers me." We sat in silence for a moment. The recording device hummed quietly in the background. Pierce looked at his notes, then back at me. "Mr. Hartley, I'm going to keep your report on file. I'm going to note it as a legitimate sighting with a credible witness. And I'm going to add it to the pattern of similar reports we've received. If we get more calls, if other drivers experience what you did, it'll build a case for a formal investigation." "What kind of investigation?" "I don't know yet. Depends on what resources we can access. Maybe FAA coordination. Maybe environmental services to check for gas leaks or geological activity that could cause hallucinations. Maybe even reaching out to federal agencies if we think there's a national security component." "You really think there might be?" "I think something is happening out there. Whether it's natural, man-made, or something else I can't say. But I take every report seriously, especially from someone like you. Someone like me? Professional driver, experienced, sober, no history of mental health issues or attention-seeking behavior. When someone with your profile reports something unusual, I pay attention, because you're not the type to make this up for entertainment. I appreciated that, more than he probably knew. What should I do if it happens again? Call me immediately. Not dispatch, not 911. Call my direct line. He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the table. My cell is on there. If you see those lights again, if anything unusual happens, call me while it's happening. Don't wait. Don't drive another mile. Stop where you are and call. If I can get to the scene while something is still active, that changes everything. I took the card and put it in my wallet. You think I'll see it again? I think whatever's out there is still out there. And if it followed you once, it might do it again. That thought sat heavy in my chest. The idea that I might have been marked somehow, tagged, identified as someone worth following. One more thing, Pierce said. There are people who spend a lot of time thinking about this kind of stuff. UFO researchers, paranormal investigators, amateur scientists. Some of them monitor police bands and news reports looking for cases like yours. They might reach out to you. They might offer to help or ask for interviews. How would they even know about me? Word gets around. Small communities, everybody talks. If you want to talk to them, that's your business. But be careful who you trust. Some of them are legitimate researchers trying to understand unexplained phenomena. A lot of them aren't. They're looking for content, attention, validation of their beliefs. They'll use your story whether it helps you or not. I'm not looking to become a UFO guy. I just want to understand what I saw. Fair enough. Just keep your guard up. And remember, you can always call me if you need guidance on who's legit and who isn't. Appreciated. We stood. Pierce opened the door and walked me back to the lobby. At the front desk, Donna looked up and gave me a small nod, like she knew what I'd been talking about and didn't judge me for it. Pierce extended his hand again. Take care of yourself, Mr. Hartley, and keep your eyes open out there. I will. I walked out into the bright morning sun and stood in the parking lot for a moment, letting the warmth sink into my skin. The interview had taken maybe 45 minutes, but it felt longer, like I'd been compressed and then released. My truck sat where I'd parked it, solid and real and familiar. I climbed in and sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the familiar texture of the steering wheel cover. The radio was off. The cab was quiet except for the faint ticking of cooling metal. I pulled out Pierce's card and looked at it. Just a standard business card with the county seal, his name, his title, a phone number, and email address. Nothing special, but it represented something. Official acknowledgement. Someone in authority who believed me enough to keep a record. That was more than I'd had an hour ago. You think I'm making that part up? I think the mind does strange things under stress. Low light, isolation, fatigue. Even if you're not tired, the conditions can create visual artifacts. Shadows that look like figures. Lights that appear to move when they're stationary. I know the difference between a shadow and what I saw. I'm sure you do, but I have to consider all possibilities. I understood where he was coming from. He was doing his job. Being skeptical was part of that. But I also knew what I'd experienced was real. And sitting in that interview room, being polite and reasonable, wasn't going to change his mind. Okay, I said, I appreciate your time. If you hear about any other reports, would you let me know? I can do that. He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. My direct line is on there. Call if you remember anything else or if it happens again. It won't happen again. I'm taking a different route from now on. Probably a good idea. We stood and he walked me out. At the front desk, he paused and lowered his voice. Mr. Hartley, one more thing. There are people who spend a lot of time thinking about this kind of stuff. UFO researchers, paranormal investigators. If you want to talk to them, that's your business. But be careful who you trust. Some of them are legitimate. A lot of them aren't. I'm not looking to become a UFO guy. I just want to understand what I saw. Fair enough. Take care of yourself. I left the office and stood in the parking lot, staring at the mountains in the distance. The La Salles were snow-capped and bright under the morning sun. Beautiful. Normal. The kind of view that makes you forget anything strange exists in the world. But I couldn't forget. And I knew talking to Pierce hadn't accomplished anything except confirming I wasn't the only one who'd seen lights on that road. I got in my truck and checked my phone. I had 3 delivery requests waiting. All of them involved routes through southern Utah. I declined 2 that would take me back on 191. Accepted one that routed through I-70 instead. Longer drive, worse road, more traffic. But I didn't care. I wasn't going back to that stretch of highway unless I had no other choice. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept driving. Different routes, different schedules. I avoided 191 completely, and for those 2 weeks nothing unusual happened. The trucks ran fine, the radios worked, the clocks stayed synchronized, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The line, the column, the figure, the missing minute. I started researching. Late at night in truck stop parking lots, I'd sit with my laptop and search for similar reports. I found dozens, hundreds even. People describing lights that followed their vehicles, objects that hovered over roads, time distortions, missing minutes, sometimes hours. Most of the accounts were vague, second-hand stories, things someone's cousin saw or a friend of a friend experienced. But some were detailed, first-person narratives that matched my own experience in unsettling ways. One report from 2017 described a line of light on a highway in Nevada. The witness was a long-haul driver like me. He described the line as 2 inches wide, glowing blue-white, hovering just above the road. He said it paced his truck for several miles before vanishing. He didn't mention a column or a figure, but the line itself was identical to what I'd seen. Another report from 2019 came from a sheriff's deputy in Arizona. He was patrolling a rural highway at night when his radio started malfunctioning. The display showed reversed numbers. The station frequency flipped backward. When he pulled over to check the equipment, he saw a vertical column of light standing on the shoulder about 100 yards ahead. He watched it for 2 minutes. Then it rose straight up and disappeared. When he checked his dashcam footage later, the file was corrupted. Only static remained. The reversed radio numbers. That detail matched mine exactly. I saved both reports and kept digging. I found a forum dedicated to highway anomalies. Truckers, law enforcement, road workers, people who spent their nights driving empty highways and occasionally saw things that didn't fit. I created an account and posted my story. I kept it factual, times, locations, descriptions. I included photos of the road even though they showed nothing unusual. I mentioned the missing minute and the reversed radio display. The responses came within hours. One user wrote, "Saw something similar on I-80 in Wyoming last year. Line of light. Followed my car for about 5 miles. Never got close enough to see it clearly, but it matched your description. No missing time, though." Another happened to me near Roswell in 2016, except mine was a grid pattern, multiple lines forming squares on the road. They pulsed in sequence. When I drove through them, my truck lost power for about 30 seconds, came back on its own, and another. Check your vehicle logs, specifically your ECM data. If time was distorted, there should be a gap in the recorded engine metrics. Might show how long you were actually stopped. That last comment made me sit up straight. I hadn't thought about the engine control module. Every modern truck has one. It records everything. RPM, speed, throttle position, fuel consumption, all time-stamped to the second. If there was a gap in that data, it would prove the missing time wasn't just a clock malfunction. The next morning, I took my truck to a mechanic in Moab, a guy I'd used before, trustworthy. I told him I needed my ECM data pulled for maintenance records. He didn't ask questions, just hooked up his laptop and downloaded the logs. I took the files to a coffee shop and opened them on my own computer. The data was dense, columns of numbers and codes, but I knew what to look for. I found the timestamp for March 17th and scrolled through the evening hours. 9:47 p.m. Normal operation. Speed 65 km/h. RPM 1,800. 10:15 p.m. Moab area. Stoppa for fuel. Engine off for 6 minutes. 10:28 p.m. Departure. Speed increasing to 60 mph. 10:47 p.m. Speed 52 mph. RPM 1,650. 10:47 p.m. Speed 52 mph. RPM 1,650. I stopped. That line was duplicated. The exact same timestamp with the exact same data. That shouldn't happen. The ECM records every second. Each entry should have a unique timestamp. I kept reading. 10:47 p.m. Speed 52 mph. RPM 1,650. 10:47 p.m. Speed 52 mph. RPM 1,650. 10:47 p.m. Speed 52 mph. RPM 1,650. The same line repeated 43 times. 43 entries with identical data and identical timestamps. Then, abruptly, it jumped. 10:48 p.m. Speed 11 mph. RPM 1,200. 10:48 p.m. Speed 8 mph. RPM 1,150. 10:48 p.m. Speed 0 mph. RPM 1,100. The truck had stopped. The log showed it. But the timestamp gap was only 1 minute. From 10:47 to 10:48. According to the ECM, I'd been stopped for less than 60 seconds. But the duplicated entries told a different story. 43 entries should have taken 43 seconds to record. But they all had the same timestamp, like the system had gotten stuck in a loop, recording data but unable to advance the clock. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. This was evidence. Not proof of what I'd seen, but proof that something had happened to my truck. Something that affected its computer systems in ways that shouldn't be possible. I printed the ECM logs and put them in a folder. Then I called Deputy Pierce. He answered on the third ring. Pierce? Deputy, this is Wes Hartley. We spoke a couple weeks ago about the incident on 191. I remember. What can I do for you? I pulled my truck's engine control module data. There's an anomaly in the logs that corresponds to the time I saw the lights. I'd like to show it to you. There was a pause. What kind of anomaly? Duplicated timestamps. 43 entries recorded in the same second. Then a gap. I think it shows that time was distorted during the event. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Hartley, I appreciate you following up, but ECM data showing a glitch doesn't necessarily mean I know what you're going to say, that it's a malfunction. The computers have bugs. But this particular bug happened at the exact time I was stopped on the highway with a column of light above me. That's not coincidence. Okay, I'll take a look at it. Can you email me the files? I'd rather show you in person. I'm in Moab now. I can come to your office. I'm actually out on patrol. Where are you? Main Street, coffee shop near the park. Give me 15 minutes. He showed up in his patrol vehicle and parked out front. I met him at his window and handed him the folder. He flipped through the printouts, studying the columns of data. You understand this stuff? He asked. Enough to know what's normal and what isn't. Those duplicated lines aren't normal. He nodded slowly. You mind if I show this to someone? Guy I know who works on vehicle diagnostics. Get his take on it. That's fine. I want an explanation as much as you do. I'll call you once I hear back from him. Appreciate it. He drove off, and I went back inside. I spent the rest of the day working local deliveries around Moab. Short hauls that kept me busy and kept my mind from circling back to the same questions. What was the light? Where did it come from? Why did it follow me? Pierce called me that evening. I showed the data to my guy. He says the duplication is unusual, but not unheard of. ECM systems can glitch under certain conditions. Voltage spikes, electromagnetic interference, corrupted sensors. It happens. But does it happen for exactly 43 entries and then correct itself immediately? He said it's possible. Not common, but possible. What about the missing minute on my dashboard clock? Clock drift. It happens over time if the battery is weak or the system isn't synced regularly. I closed my eyes and took a breath. You're giving me rational explanations for every individual thing. And I get that. But when you put them all together, the lights, the figure, the cold, the radio malfunction, the ECM duplication, the missing minute, it doesn't add up to a series of coincidences. It adds up to something else. I hear you, but I can't investigate something else. I need concrete evidence, physical traces, multiple witnesses. Right now, all I have is your testimony and some ambiguous data logs. So that's it? Case closed? There's no case to close. I'm not dismissing what you experienced. I'm just telling you where we are from a law enforcement perspective. Okay, thanks for trying. Mr. Hartley, if this happens again, to you or anyone else, call me immediately. Don't wait. Don't drive another mile. Stop where you are and call. If I can get to the scene while something is still happening, that changes everything. Understood. We hung up. I sat in my truck in a truck stop parking lot north of Moab and watched the sunset behind the canyon walls. The light turned the red rock gold, then orange, then deep purple. It was beautiful. It was also the kind of light that could play tricks on you if you weren't careful. If you were tired or distracted or looking for something unusual, you might see patterns that weren't there. Shapes in the shadows, lights in the sky. But I hadn't been looking for anything unusual. I'd been driving. And what I saw wasn't a trick of the light. It was deliberate, responsive, and impossible. I started the engine and headed north on US 191. I had a load waiting in Green River, and I needed to pick it up by morning. The route took me back through the same stretch of highway where everything had happened. I'd been avoiding it for 2 weeks. But avoidance wasn't sustainable. This was my route, my territory. I couldn't let fear dictate where I drove. The sun dropped below the horizon and darkness settled over the desert. I passed through Moab at 8:30 p.m., stopped for fuel and coffee, checked my mirrors compulsively. Everything was normal, just another night run. South of town, I approached the section near mile marker 118. The straightaway, the flat stretch with no curves and wide shoulders. I slowed to 50 miles per hour and turned off the radio. I wanted to hear everything, any change in engine tone, any sound from outside, anything unusual. The road was empty. no other vehicles, no lights in the distance. Just my headlights cutting through the dark and the hum of tires on asphalt. I passed the area where I thought the column had been. Nothing, just road. I kept driving, eyes scanning left and right, checking mirrors, watching for movement. Nothing. By the time I reached the halfway point to Green River, I started to relax. Whatever had happened 2 weeks ago wasn't happening tonight. Maybe it was a one-time event. Maybe the conditions had to be perfect. Maybe I'd just gotten unlucky. Or maybe it was waiting. At 9:47 p.m., I saw it again. Not the line this time, not the column. Something different. A light in the sky. Far ahead, maybe 3 miles out. It moved horizontally, parallel to the highway. Not a plane. Too low and too slow. Not a helicopter. No sound, no navigation lights, no rotor wash visible in the air. It was a sphere, perfectly round, glowing the same pale blue-white as the line. It traveled at maybe 100 miles per hour, moving south along the highway at an altitude of about 500 feet. I eased off the throttle and watched it. The sphere maintained its course and speed. It didn't bob or weave. It didn't ascend or descend. It just moved in a straight line, steady and silent. Then it stopped. Not gradually. It just froze in place. 1 second it was moving. The next it was stationary. And it stayed there, hovering above the desert to my right. I checked my speed. 45 miles per hour. I checked the dashboard clock. 9:48 p.m. I checked my mirrors. Empty road behind me. The sphere began to descend. Slowly at first, then faster. It dropped toward the ground in a controlled fall, like it was being lowered on a cable. When it was about 50 feet off the desert floor, it stopped again. Then it brightened. The glow intensified until it was almost painful to look at. I squinted and looked away. When I looked back, the sphere had split into 3 smaller spheres, each one about a third the size of the original. They separated, forming a triangle in the air above the desert. The triangle rotated, slow, deliberate, like a gear turning. Each sphere held its position relative to the others. After one complete rotation, they stopped. And then they started moving toward the highway, not fast, maybe 20 miles per hour. They maintained the triangle formation as they approached. I was still moving south at 45. They were angling to intercept me. I accelerated. 50. 55, 60. The spheres matched my speed. The triangle shifted, adjusting its angle to stay on course with my truck. My heart rate spiked. I pressed the accelerator harder. 65, 70. The spheres kept pace, effortlessly. They were 200 yards away now, then 150, then 100. I grabbed the CB mic, keyed it. Anyone on 191, this is southbound at mile marker 120. I've got 3 objects approaching my vehicle from the east. Unknown origin. If you can hear me, respond. Static, then a voice. Copy that, southbound. This is northbound at 115. I don't see anything on my end. What are you seeing? 3 lights, triangular formation, moving fast. They're tracking me. Tracking you. Matching my speed. Coming toward the highway. Copy. Stay on the channel. I'm pulling over. The spheres were 50 yards away now. Close enough that I could see details. Each one had a surface that wasn't quite solid. It looked textured, layered, like rings of light stacked on top of each other and spinning in opposite directions. They reached the highway and crossed onto the pavement behind my truck. I watched them in the mirror. They paced me for maybe 5 seconds. Then they accelerated. They came up alongside the truck, one on each side and one above. The one above was visible through my windshield. It hovered maybe 20 feet over the cab, keeping perfect position as I drove. The two flanking me stayed level with my doors, maybe 10 feet out. The CB crackled. "Southbound. I've got visual on you. I see your truck, but I don't see any lights." "They're right here," I said. "3 of them. How can you not see them?" "I'm looking at you through binoculars. Clear view. No lights. Just your rig." That didn't make sense. The spheres were close enough that they should have been visible from miles away. They were bright. Impossible to miss. But the northbound driver saw nothing. "Copy," I said. "Thanks for trying." The sphere above me descended. It lowered until it was inches above my windshield. I could see the spinning layers clearly now. They rotated in complex patterns, each ring moving independently. The light they produced didn't reflect off the glass. It passed through it. The interior of my cab was filled with blue-white illumination. The radio display started cycling again, numbers flipping, scrambling, reversing. The dashboard lights flickered. The engine note changed pitch, and the temperature dropped. I knew what was coming. I'd felt this before. The pressure, the cold, the sense that reality was bending around me. But this time I wasn't stopping. I kept my speed at 70 and my foot on the accelerator. If they wanted me to stop, they'd have to force it. The sphere above me pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times. With each pulse, the pressure increased. My ears popped, my vision blurred at the edges. The steering wheel felt loose in my hands. Then the spheres vanished, not gradually, not with a fade. They just stopped existing. One frame, they were there. The next frame, they were gone. The light in my cab returned to normal. The radio stopped cycling. The engine smoothed out. I checked the mirrors. Empty. Checked the sky through the windshield. Nothing. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding and eased off the throttle. My hands were shaking. My shirt was soaked with sweat. The CB crackled. "Southbound, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "What happened? You okay?" "They're gone. Just vanished." "Copy. You want me to call it in?" "No, there's nothing to call in. No evidence, no witnesses who saw what I saw. It'll just be another unexplained light report." "Understood. Be safe out there." "You too." I drove the rest of the way to Green River without incident. Arrived at the warehouse at 11:30 p.m. and backed into the loading dock. A forklift operator unloaded my trailer while I stood outside in the cold and smoked a cigarette I'd bummed from another driver. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Deputy Pierce. Got a report from a driver who saw you on 199 tonight. Said you were talking about lights on the CB. Did something happen?" I typed back. "Yes, same area. 3 spheres this time. Paced my truck for about 2 minutes, then disappeared. No physical effects this time. No time loss. 3 dots appeared. Then, you okay to drive?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Just shaken." "Copy. Let me know if it happens again." "Will do." I finished the cigarette and climbed back in the truck. The load was done. I had the rest of the night off. I could sleep in the truck or get a motel room, but I didn't want to sleep. I wanted answers. I spent the next 3 days in Green River. I told my dispatcher I needed time off for maintenance issues. It wasn't entirely a lie. My truck needed an oil change and a tire rotation, but the real reason was I needed to think, to process, to figure out what the hell was happening on that stretch of highway. I went back to the forums, posted an update, described the 3 spheres, the way they matched my speed, the fact that another driver saw my truck, but not the lights. That last detail sparked immediate responses. One user wrote, "Selective visibility. It's been reported before. Whatever these things are, they don't show up the same way for everyone. Some people see them clearly, others see nothing. The pattern suggests the phenomenon chooses who can perceive it. Another. Check if there were any military exercises in the area. White Sands is in New Mexico, but they run operations all over the Southwest. Could be experimental aircraft with stealth capabilities. I hadn't considered military involvement. It was possible. The technology I'd witnessed, the spheres, the column, the way they moved, could be advanced drones or some kind of directed energy system. But that didn't explain the selective visibility or the time distortions. I called Pierce again, got his voicemail, left a message asking if there had been any military notifications for airspace use in the area. He called back 2 hours later. Checked with FAA and Hill Air Force Base, he said. No exercises reported for that corridor in the last month. No TFRs, no NOTAMs, nothing. What about classified operations? If they're classified, they're not going to tell a county deputy. But typically, even black budget stuff has some kind of notification protocol for local law enforcement. We don't get details, but we get told to expect unusual activity. I haven't received anything like that. So, it's not military. Not officially, anyway. What do you think it is? He was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I don't know. But you're not the only one seeing things out there. I've had 3 more calls in the last week, all from the same stretch of highway, all describing lights or objects that don't match conventional aircraft. 3 more? Why didn't you tell me? I'm telling you now, and I'm taking it seriously. But I need more data. I need patterns. Times, locations, weather conditions, vehicle types. If there's a commonality, we can start to predict when and where this happens. I can help with that. I know truckers who run these routes. I can ask around, collect reports. Be careful how you ask. If word gets out that there's something unusual on 191, you'll get attention you don't want. Media, conspiracy theorists, thrill seekers. It'll make my job harder, and it'll make yours more complicated. Understood. I'll keep it quiet. We hung up. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Date, time, location, description, weather, vehicle type. I went back through the forum posts and pulled data from similar reports, filled in as much as I could. Patterns started to emerge. Most sightings occurred between 9 p.m. and midnight. Most were on clear nights with no precipitation. Most were in remote areas with minimal traffic. And most involved some kind of electromagnetic interference. Radios, phones, dashboard displays. I added my own experiences to the spreadsheet. 2 separate encounters, same location, same time window. Clear weather both nights. Different manifestations. Lines and columns the first time, spheres the second. What was the connection? What made that particular stretch of highway a hot zone? I pulled up a map and marked the location. Mile marker 118 to 120, a 2-mile stretch south of Moab. I zoomed out and looked at the surrounding area. To the east, the La Salle Mountains. To the west, open desert and the approach to Canyonlands. To the south, more desert and eventual connections to Monticello and Blanding. Nothing stood out. No military bases, no power plants, no radio towers, just highway and wilderness. I zoomed in and switched to satellite view. The resolution was high enough to see individual vehicles on the road. I scanned the area around mile marker 118. Red rock, sagebrush, scattered junipers. The road cut a dark line through pale desert. And then I saw something. A formation, not natural, not quite a structure. More like an arrangement of rocks that didn't match the surrounding terrain. They formed a rough circle about 200 feet in diameter, sitting maybe 300 yards west of the highway. I switched back to the map view. The circle didn't show up. No notation, no label. I switched to terrain view. The elevation data showed a slight depression where the circle was, but nothing that would indicate significance. I saved the coordinates and made a note to check it in person. The next morning I drove back to the site. Arrived around 10 a.m., parked on the shoulder near mile marker 118 and walked into the desert. The ground was hard-packed dirt and gravel. Easy walking. I kept my phone out using the GPS to navigate toward the coordinates I'd marked. It took 15 minutes to reach the formation. Up close, it was more obvious. The rocks were arranged deliberately. Not stacked, just positioned. Each one was about the size of a basketball, smoothed by wind and time, placed at intervals around a central point. I counted them, 32 rocks, forming a circle with a diameter of about 200 feet. The spacing was too regular to be natural. Someone had put them here, or something had. I walked the perimeter. The ground inside the circle looked different, darker, like it had been disturbed or compacted. I knelt and touched the soil. It was hard, packed tighter than the surrounding area. I dug my fingers in, couldn't break the surface. I pulled out a pocket knife and scraped at the ground. The blade barely made a mark. The soil was almost like concrete, packed so tightly that it resisted penetration. I took photos, wide shots of the entire circle, close-ups of individual rocks, the compacted soil, the surrounding area. Then I walked to the center of the circle and stood there. The silence was immediate. Not the natural quiet of the desert, something heavier, like the air pressure had changed. I felt it in my chest. A weight, a presence. I turned slowly, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved, no wind, no birds, no sound. Then I heard it, a hum, low frequency. So deep I felt it more than heard it. It came from below, from the ground itself. A vibration that traveled up through my boots and into my bones. I backed out of the circle. Fast. Not running, but close. The hum faded as I moved away. By the time I was 50 feet outside the perimeter, it was gone. I stood there for a moment, heart racing. Then I pulled out my phone and called Pierce. "I found something," I said when he answered. "A rock formation near mile marker 118, circular pattern, deliberately arranged. The ground inside it is compacted like concrete, and when I stood in the center, I felt something, a vibration." "You're out there now?" "Yeah, just outside the formation." "Stay there, I'm coming to you." He arrived 30 minutes later in his patrol vehicle. I met him at the shoulder and led him to the site. He walked the perimeter like I had, studying the rocks, testing the soil. When he reached the center, he stopped and stood still. "You feel that?" he asked. "The hum?" "Yeah, I felt it too. What is it?" "I don't know, but this is the first physical evidence we've found. Something made this, something compacted this ground, and whatever it is, it's connected to what you saw on the highway." He pulled out his phone and took photos. Then he made a call. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I heard him say, "I need a geologist and someone who can analyze soil samples. Yeah, today if possible." We spent the next hour documenting the site. Pierce took measurements, sketched the layout in a notebook, collected soil samples from inside and outside the circle. I walked the area in wider circles, looking for other formations or signs of activity. Found nothing. By noon, a truck pulled up on the shoulder. A woman got out. Mid-40s, hiking boots, university logo on her jacket. Pierce waved her over. "This is Dr. Ellen Marsh," he said. "Geology professor from Utah State. She's helped us before with unusual findings." Dr. Marsh shook my hand and nodded. "Deputy Pierce mentioned you've had some unusual experiences out here." "That's putting it mildly," I said. She smiled. "I've heard stranger. Let's take a look." We walked her to the formation. She studied it for a long time without saying anything. Then she knelt and examined the rocks, pulled a small tool from her bag and scraped at the compacted soil, collected samples in plastic containers. "The rocks are local," she said. "Sandstone. Typical for this area, but the arrangement is deliberate. And this soil," she held up a sample, "this shouldn't be possible. The compression level is extreme. It would take hundreds of pounds per square inch to achieve this. There's no natural process that would create this pattern." "Could it be man-made?" Pierce asked. "Possibly, but you'd need heavy equipment. And there are no tracks, no signs of machinery, no disturbance to the surrounding area. What else could do this? I don't know. I'd need to analyze these samples properly, check for chemical composition, mineral content, evidence of heat or energy exposure. I can have preliminary results in a few days. Appreciate it." Dr. Marsh took more samples and photos. Then she walked to the center of the circle and stood still. After a moment, she looked at Pierce. "There's definitely something here. An electromagnetic anomaly, maybe, or acoustic. I can feel it." "We all can," I said. She nodded. "I'll run EM readings when I come back with proper equipment. For now, I'd recommend no one stand in the center for extended periods. If there's a field effect, we don't know what the long-term exposure might do." We walked back to the vehicles. Dr. Marsh loaded her samples and drove off. Pierce and I stood on the shoulder, watching the desert. "This changes things," he said. "How so?" "We have a physical site now, something we can study, monitor, protect if necessary. It's not just lights and testimony anymore, it's evidence." "You think whatever I saw on the highway is connected to that circle?" "I think it's more than coincidence that you had 2 encounters within a quarter-mile of that formation. Something is operating in this area. Whether it's natural phenomenon or something else, we need to find out." "What's the next step?" "I'm going to set up surveillance. Trail cameras, maybe a motion sensor. If something happens at that site, I want it documented. I can help. I drive this route regularly. I can check on it, keep an eye out." "I'd appreciate that. But be careful. If this thing is aware, if it's reacting to people, we don't want to provoke it." "Understood." We shook hands, and I drove back to Green River. My head was spinning. The circle, the compacted soil, the hum. It was all connected to the lights, to the spheres, to the missing time. But how? And why that location? I didn't have answers, but I had questions, and I had a place to start looking. Over the next week, I drove past the site every night. Sometimes I'd stop and walk out to the circle. The rocks were always there, unchanged. The ground was always compacted, and the hum was always present when I stood in the center. But the lights didn't return. No lines, no columns, no spheres. Just empty highway and quiet desert. Dr. Marsh called Pierce with her preliminary results. The soil samples showed abnormal compression and elevated levels of certain minerals. Silicon, magnetite, trace amounts of elements she couldn't immediately identify. The composition suggested exposure to intense electromagnetic fields, possibly sustained over a long period. Pierce set up 2 trail cameras facing the circle from different angles. Motion activated, infrared capable, 7-day battery life. If anything approached the site, the cameras would record it. Nothing triggered them for the first 5 days. On day 6, both cameras stopped working. Not dead batteries, just stopped. The memory cards were blank. The settings had been reset to factory defaults. And the timestamps showed gaps, hours missing from the logs. Pierce retrieved the cameras and found no physical damage. They functioned normally when he tested them. But whatever had happened at the site had affected them the same way the lights had affected my truck's electronics. "It doesn't want to be watched," Pierce said when he called me. "Then what do? We keep trying, and we stay alert. Whatever this is, it's active, it's present, and it's choosing when and how to reveal itself." That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've driven past that site maybe 50 times. I've stopped to check the circle a dozen times. The formation is still there. The hum is still present. But the lights haven't returned. Maybe they're done with me. Maybe they've moved on to someone else. Or maybe they're just waiting, watching, deciding if I'm worth another encounter. I don't know, and I've made peace with not knowing. What I do know is that something exists on that stretch of highway south of Moab. Something that can manipulate light, affect electronics, distort time, and compress soil with force we can't explain. Something that watches us as much as we watch for it. I still drive that route. It's my job. It's my territory. I'm not going to let fear keep me off the road. But I drive carefully now. I pay attention. I check my mirrors more often. I keep my radio on and my phone charged. And I watch for lines of light sliding across the pavement. If you drive US 191 at night, between Moab and Monticello, keep your eyes on the road. Not just for deer or other vehicles, but for things that move wrong. Things that glow without casting shadows. Things that pace your vehicle and match your speed. If you see a line of light, thin, blue-white, hovering just above the pavement, don't stop to investigate. Don't try to film it. Just keep driving. Keep your speed steady. Don't brake suddenly. Don't swerve. And if the line splits into two and forms a corridor, if a column rises ahead of you, if spheres descend from the sky, stay calm. Don't panic. Don't try to outrun them. They're faster than you. They're more maneuverable than anything we've built. Just drive through it. Keep moving, and once you're clear, check your clocks, check your phone, check your vehicle logs if you know how. Because time might have slipped, minutes might be missing, and you'll never get them back. That's what happened to me, that's what's still happening out there, and that's all I can tell you. The sliding light is real. The circle is real. The missing time is real. I have evidence, I have witnesses. I have Deputy Pierce and Dr. Marsh and a dozen forum users who've experienced similar things. But I don't have explanations, and I've stopped looking for them. Because some things exist outside our framework of understanding. Some things operate by rules we haven't discovered yet. And some things are content to remain mysteries. The highway is still there. The desert is still there. And somewhere in that darkness, between mile marker 118 and 120, something is still there too. Waiting, watching, sliding across the asphalt like a line drawn by an invisible hand. I'll see it again. I'm certain of that. And when I do, I'll document it. I'll call Pierce. I'll add it to the spreadsheet. But I won't stop driving. Because that's what I do. And whatever's out there, it's part of the territory now. Just another hazard on a long haul. Just another thing that doesn't make sense but refuses to go away. Just another mystery on a highway that's seen too many to count. And if you're out there driving at night, if you see something that makes you question what's possible, remember this. You're not alone. Others have seen it too. And we're all just trying to make it home. 1 mile at a time. 1 night at a time. 1 encounter at a time. That's all we can do. That's all anyone can do when faced with the unknown. We document, we adapt. We keep moving. And we hope that whatever's watching us decides we're not worth following.